Welcome back to Goofy Harry. Today's story: what if Vegeta found baby Harry and trained him in the Saiyan way of battle? If you're new here, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so a new adventure never slips past you. Now then, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Cinder in the Ruins. The mountains north of West City had no name worth speaking, and that was exactly why Vegeta trained there. He hung in the black above a granite spur, arms folded, knees drawn, the night wind dragging at his hair and finding no purchase. Below him, a valley fell away into pine and shadow. Above him, the stars wheeled in their slow, indifferent arc, and somewhere among them was the world he had been born to rule, burned to slag a lifetime ago. He did not look up at the stars. He looked at his own hands, opening and closing them, counting the calluses by feel. 11 months on this soft green planet. 11 months of eating their food and breathing their thick, wet air and sleeping under a roof Bulma had assigned him, as though he were a stray she'd taken pity on. 11 months of being, in every way the universe measured strength, the second strongest creature on Earth. Second to a low-class clown who had grown up grubbing in the dirt and still beat him on a mountain road like it cost him nothing. The thought turned in his chest like a blade he kept too close. He had stopped trying to put it down. A blade you carried long enough became a kind of company. He dropped. Air screamed past. He pulled up 2 meters above the granite, snapped his palm down, and the Kai left him in a white lance that split the spur clean in half. Stone groaned. Half a mountain shoulder slid into the valley with a sound like the world clearing its throat, and Vegeta hovered in the dust of it, breathing slow, unsatisfied. It was always unsatisfying. You could break a mountain and the mountain didn't care, and neither in the end did you. There was a hunger in him that no quantity of rock would feed, and he had named it once and never named it again. He wanted to be tested. He wanted, just once, to come up against a thing that would not move and learn whether he could move it anyway. That was when he felt it, not Kakarot. He knew Kakarot's energy the way you know the footstep of someone you hate on the stair below you, large, warm, idiotically calm. This was nothing like that. It came from the far side of the planet, a continent and an ocean away, and it arrived in his senses not as a presence but as a wound, a spike, a single white flare of power that had no business existing, there and gone in less than a heartbeat, and under it, threaded through it, a second flavor of energy he had no name for at all. Kai had a taste like hot metal. This other thing tasted like the inside of a storm, like the air a half-second before lightning, sweet and wrong and old. Then the flare collapsed. Where it had been there was a smear, a residue, a coal still glowing in the dark of his perception. Vegeta turned in the air toward it before he had decided to. He told himself it was nothing. A freak, a fluke, some earthling weapon misfiring, some last gasp of a dying machine. He told himself this all the way across the ocean, flying low and fast over black water with the moon laying a broken silver road beneath him, and he did not believe a word of it because he had felt power his whole life and never once felt power that survived its own death and kept smoldering. Power in his experience was simple. It rose and it spent itself and it went out. It did not linger in the ground like a refusal. He crossed a coastline of cliffs and sleeping towns. He crossed fields cut into neat squares by hedges, a country that thought of itself as tame. The coal in his senses grew from an ember to a hearth as he closed, until he could pick the exact house out of the dark from a kilometer up. It wasn't a house anymore. Vegeta came down in the lane outside it, boots ringing on wet cobblestone, and let his eyes adjust to the ruin. The cottage had been 2 stories once. The right side of it still was. The left side had been opened up the way you open a tin can with your thumb, the roof peeled back, the upper wall blown out into the garden, so that the night looked straight into a child's bedroom, hanging in the air with its wallpaper of yellow stars. Smoke rose from the rubble in thin gray ropes, but there was no fire. Whatever had burned here had burned without flame. The grass in the garden was scorched in a perfect circle, and at the dead center of the circle the scorching was darkest, as if the thing that had happened had folded all its violence down into one point and then ceased. That point was upstairs. He could feel it, the residue, the storm smell, hanging in the broken bedroom like a held note after the singer has gone. The front door stood open. Vegeta went through it. He had walked through the aftermath of his own work on 100 worlds. He knew the particular silence of a place where the living had just stopped being living, the way the quiet presses in and fills the rooms like water. He found the first body at the foot of the stairs, a young man, dark-haired, lying where he had fallen with one arm flung out toward the door he had tried to defend, his eyes open and gone to glass, no mark on him at all. Vegeta crouched over him and read him as he'd read a battlefield. No wound, no burn, no broken bone. The face still held the shape of a shout, the mouth still open on a word it never finished. Something had reached into this person and switched him off the way you'd kill a lamp, and that told Vegeta more about the power that had visited here than the wreckage did. Not a blast, not strength, something colder. Something that did not bother with the body because it had decided to take only the life. His lip curled, cowardice wearing the costume of mastery. He had met killers like that across the stars, the ones who never dirtied their hands, who made death into a kind of paperwork, and he had never respected one of them. He climbed the stairs. They were narrow and human-sized and creaked under his weight, and on the wall going up there were photographs, and the people in the photographs were moving, laughing, waving, a wedding, an infant held up to a winter sun, turning their painted faces to watch the stranger climb past. He did not slow for them. He noted them and went on, and the storm smell thickened with every step until it coated the back of his throat. The bedroom door had been blown off its hinges and lay flat across the landing. A second body lay just inside, a young woman, red-haired, and she had fallen differently than the father below, not toward an enemy but away from one, her arms still curved around the empty air in front of a wooden crib, her whole shape bent into a wall she had made of herself between the doorway and the child. Vegeta stood very still. He had seen mothers die before. He had, in another life, on other worlds, been the reason. It had meant nothing to him then, and he had spent a long time being proud of how little it meant. He looked at the curve of her dead arms, frozen in the act of shielding, and felt the old nothing reach for him and find, to his irritation, that it could not quite get a grip, because the crib was not empty. A baby sat up in it. It should not have been alive. The whole left side of the room had been unmade, the window gone, the wall a ragged mouth open to the night, and a meter from the crib the floorboards were charred down to black ribs, where that single point of violence had touched and lifted away. By every law Vegeta understood, the thing that had switched off the father and folded the mother should have erased this soft, helpless creature without slowing down. Instead, the baby sat in its blanket among the splinters, and it was watching him, not crying. That was the part that stopped him in the doorway. A baby in a broken house full of smoke and the bodies of its parents, and it was not crying. It gripped the rail of the crib with two fat fists and had pulled itself up to stand, swaying, and it watched the armored stranger in the doorway with an expression Vegeta knew, an expression he had worn into 1,000 fights, the flat, unblinking stare of something that has decided not to be afraid even though it has every reason in the world to be. On its forehead, raw and fresh and faintly luminous, was a cut in the shape of a lightning bolt. Vegeta crossed the room. Glass crunched under his boots. He stopped at the crib and looked down, and the baby looked up, and neither of them blinked. "You," Vegeta said, "are supposed to be dead." The residue clung thickest right here, right over the crib, the storm smell strongest, and now that he was close he could read what his senses had been telling him from across the ocean. The power that had come for this child had broken on it. He could see the shape of the rebound as he could read scorch patterns on a hull. Something immense and cold had struck downward here at this exact point, and instead of passing through the child and out the other side, it had hit something and turned, hit something and shattered, and gone screaming back the way it came. The white flare he'd felt, the coal that wouldn't die. It was leaking out of the cut on the small forehead in faint threads, that storm energy, that not Kai, and it was leaking out of the whole little body, banked low, an ocean of it folded up inside a creature the size of a loaf of bread. "What are you?" Vegeta murmured. The baby let go of the rail with one hand and reached up toward his face. He should have stepped back. He didn't. The fat fist closed on the lip of his glove, and the grip was strong, absurdly strong, strong enough that he felt it through the leather, and the green eyes under the lightning cut held his black ones without the faintest tremor. Something happened in Vegeta's chest that he did not have a word for and did not want one. He had spent his whole life around power. He had learned to feel it like heat against the skin. And standing in the wreckage of a murdered family with an infant's fist clamped on his glove, he felt it now, coming off this scrap of a thing in slow banked waves, not the storm energy alone but something braided through it, a will, a refusal, a furious little engine of survival that had looked death in the face at 1 year old and given it nothing. A warrior's heart, in a body that couldn't hold its own head up. He had come expecting a weapon, or a corpse, or a fraud. He had found the rarest thing in the universe, the thing he had been searching the stars for and pretending he wasn't. Raw, undeniable, impossible potential. Wasted, orphaned, sitting in its own blood in a ruin, waiting for someone to come and either save it or finish it. Far off, at the very edge of his senses, two presences appeared on the wind. Large ones, by earthling standards, one of them enormous, lumbering, the other old and sharp and bright as a drawn needle. They were coming this way, and coming fast, arrowing straight toward the broken house through the dark, and they were coming for the child. He could read that much from the line of their approach. Vegeta looked down at the baby. The baby looked up at him and would not let go of his glove. He thought about the father at the foot of the stairs, dead defending a door. He thought about the mother bent into a wall in front of the crib. He thought about whatever soft hands were rushing here now to scoop up this prize and raise it in whatever passed for strength on a planet that believed hedges made it tame, and the picture his mind drew of it, this fire, this potential, swaddled and coddled and let to go cold, put something bitter in his mouth. "They'll ruin you," he said. The baby gurgled. The grip tightened. Vegeta reached into the crib and lifted the child out, blanket and all, and held it against the breastplate of his armor with the stiff, wrong, careful hold of someone who had never once in his life carried a thing he meant to keep. The baby fit into the crook of his arm and immediately fisted a hand in the collar of his suit, and yawned, enormously, jaw cracking, untroubled by the ruin or the alien prince who carried it out of it. "Don't," Vegeta said, "get comfortable." The two presences were a minute out, maybe less. He turned to the broken wall, to the night and the scorched garden and the lane where he'd landed, and then he stopped and looked back one time at the red-haired woman bent over nothing. He survived, Vegeta told her, because there was no one else to tell, and it seemed obscurely that it ought to be said aloud. "Whatever you did, he survived it." His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "I'll see he doesn't waste it." He did not wait for the silence to answer. He stepped to the gap in the wall, gathered his Kai around them both in a shell that turned the cold wind soft, and shot up into the dark over England. A half-minute later, a motorcycle the size of a small truck came down out of the clouds onto the ruined lane, and a giant in a moleskin coat climbed off it, and behind him, with no machine at all, a tall old wizard simply arrived where a moment before there had been only night. Albus Dumbledore stood in the lane and looked at the broken house, and let the worst of it settle into him before he allowed himself to move. He had known the instant the instruments in his office shrieked and went dark, that he was already too late for James and Lily. He had hoped, with the stubborn hope of someone who has outlived most of the people he loved, that he was not too late for the child. "Professor," said Hagrid behind him in a voice gone thick. "Professor, the house, I see it, Hagrid." They went in together. The giant had to turn sideways through the door and stoop nearly double inside, and he wept the whole way, great silent tears rolling into his beard, and stopped at the foot of the stairs and would not look down at what lay there. Dumbledore looked. He made himself look, because he had sent these two young people into hiding, and the looking was the smallest part of what he owed them. He knelt by James Potter for a moment with his hand not quite touching the cold shoulder, and his lips moved, and then he rose and climbed the stairs past the photographs that turned to watch him with faces that did not yet know. The nursery undid even him a little. He stood in the wreck of it with the night pouring through the wall and looked at Lily where she had fallen, and the shape of her arms told the whole story without a single word, the curve of a mother who had put her body between her son and the end of the world. And the crib was empty. "He's gone," Hagrid breathed, filling the doorway. "Professor, Harry's gone. You don't think he..." Dumbledore was very still. He held his hand over the crib, over the splinters and the charred floor and the place where a child should have been, and he felt what lingered there, the unmistakable signature of magic torn and turned back on itself, and under it fainter, going colder by the second, a thing he did not recognize at all. A second residue. A wrongness laid over the wreck of the curse like a second set of footprints in snow. "No, Hagrid, Voldemort did not take him." His voice was quiet and it did not shake, and that was its own kind of terrible. "Voldemort is gone. The curse rebounded. I can read that much. Harry lived." He drew his hand back slowly, and then someone else came. Someone who stood in this room only minutes ago, and took him. Took him where? Who'd? I do not know. Dumbledore turned from the empty crib, and in the wandlight his face had aged a year in a minute. "I felt a power cross the country tonight, Hagrid, moving faster than anything has a right to, and I told myself it was the curse breaking. I was wrong. Whatever it was, it came here, and it has gone again, and it has carried off the most important child alive in all of Britain, and it has left no trail that any magic of mine can follow." He looked out through the torn wall at the dark where the trail simply stopped, ended in midair above the garden, where the world itself seemed to have a hole torn in it. "Find Sirius before he does something we will all regret. Set the wards on what's left of this place, and say nothing yet to anyone about the crib. But the whole world's going to want to know the lad who, the whole world," Dumbledore said, "will be told that Harry Potter is safe and hidden, which is the truth as far as it goes. Let them celebrate, let them light their candles." He started down the stairs. "Somewhere out there a child is alive who should be dead twice over, and I will find him if it takes me the rest of my life. I owe Lily that much. I owe her son a great deal more." Outside, the celebrations had already begun. all across a country that did not yet know what it had lost in the finding. Far out over black water, a prince of a dead people flew home through the last of the night with a sleeping baby buttoned inside his armor against the cold, and tried to talk himself out of what he had already done. It was a fool's errand. Vegeta knew it before he was halfway across the sea. He told himself he could leave the child at the door of some Earth institution and be back to his training by dawn, no worse for the detour. He told himself the brat was a curiosity and nothing more, a riddle he would solve and discard. He told himself, with the particular force a person reserves for the lies he most needs to believe, that he felt nothing. Then the baby, deep in sleep, worked one fist free of the blanket and pressed it flat against the cold steel over Vegeta's heart, the way a creature reaches in its dreams for the nearest warm thing and trusts that the warm thing will hold it, and Vegeta flew the rest of the way without telling himself anything at all. Bulma Briefs had seen a great many strange things since the day a boy with a monkey tail walked out of the desert holding a glass ball, and she had developed, she liked to think, a strong stomach for the impossible. She set down her coffee very carefully. "Vegeta," she said, "what is that? It's obvious what it is. It's a baby. Yes, you're holding a baby. Your powers of observation," Vegeta said, "remain a marvel." It was 4 a.m. He stood in the kitchen of the Capsule Corporation's main residence with his armor scorched along one shoulder and his hair full of plaster dust, and in the crook of his arm, wrapped in a blanket embroidered with a cartoon stag, slept an infant. It had passed out somewhere over the Atlantic and had not stirred since, one fist still anchored in his collar, drooling faintly on the armor of the Prince of all Saiyans. Bulma came around the counter in her robe and slippers and looked, and her hand rose to her mouth. "Where did you get a baby?" she said, and then fast and sharp, "Vegeta, whose baby is this? What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. Someone else did." His voice flattened. "There was a power spike on the other side of the planet. I went to look. I found a house someone had taken apart and 2 corpses in this. The thing that killed the parents tried to kill the child too and couldn't." "What do you mean it couldn't?" "I mean," Vegeta said, "that I have killed a great many things, woman, and I know what it looks like when something is supposed to be dead and isn't. The energy that hit this child rebounded. It came off him like a wave off a rock. He has a mark." He shifted the blanket with one finger, more gently than Bulma had ever seen him do anything, and there it was, the thin raw line on the forehead. "It's still warm. It's still leaking power. Not Kai. Something else. I've never felt anything like it in my life." Bulma reached out, and the baby, without waking, turned its face toward the warmth of her hand. She made a sound that wasn't a word. "He could have died in that house," she said, "if you'd left him. People were coming for him. Then why didn't you let them? Because they would have ruined him." Vegeta said it the way another person would say, of course. "Whatever world makes houses like that and lets a child be hunted in its crib, it's soft and it's stupid, and it would have raised this into nothing. He'd have grown up weak. He'd have grown up afraid." He looked down at the sleeping weight against his chest, and something moved across his face that he killed before it finished arriving. "He has the heart of a fighter. I felt it through my glove. I will not stand and watch potential like this poured into the dirt, because the people who found him don't know what they're holding." Bulma had known Vegeta long enough to understand that he never explained himself, that explaining himself was, to him, a kind of nakedness he despised, and the fact that he stood in her kitchen before dawn explaining himself at length told her more than the words did. "You want to keep him," she said slowly. "I want to train him. Vegeta, he's a baby. He won't always be. You can't just—" She pressed her fingers to her temple. "There are people out there who lost him tonight. A baby doesn't appear out of nowhere. Someone is going to come looking. The whole world is going to come looking." "Let them look," Vegeta said. "They looked on the wrong side of the planet, and they were a half-minute too slow, and now he's mine." The word landed in the kitchen and sat there between them. Bulma looked at him, at the alien prince who had arrived on her world meaning to end it, who slept in her family's home and ate her family's food, and had not, in all the months under her roof, said a single thing she would call kind. She looked at the curve of his arm around the child, stiff and wrong and absolute, the arm of someone who had wrapped himself around a thing and decided the universe would have to come through him to take it back. "You don't know the first thing about caring for a baby," she said. "I'll learn. They cry all night. They wake every 2 hours. They can't eat solid food. They can't walk. They can't do anything. Then I'll teach him." Vegeta turned the infant a fraction, settling the head into the crook of his elbow. "That is the entire point. He can't do anything. Yet, neither could I once. Someone taught me to do everything I am." The line of his mouth went hard. "Some of it I would burn out of myself if I could, but not all. I would keep the part that meant when something stronger than me put me down, I got up. That part I would keep." He looked at her and the black eyes were perfectly level. "I'll give him that part and none of the rest. He'll be strong and he won't be afraid, and he won't be cruel for the pleasure of it, because I know now what that costs and I'll spare him the bill." Outside, beyond the windows, the sky over West City had begun the slow business of turning gray. Bulma stood in her own kitchen and felt the morning come and understood that her life had just changed shape again, the way it kept insisting on doing whenever she got comfortable. "He's going to need formula," she said at last, "and about 1,000 other things, clothes, a doctor, a name." Something in Vegeta's shoulders eased by a millimeter. "There was a word on the blanket," he said. He turned the embroidered edge toward her. Below the cartoon stag, in careful looping thread some living hand had stitched in a house that no longer stood, was a single name. Bulma read it. Her eyes stung, suddenly and stupidly, and she blinked it back, because the Prince of all Saiyans would never let her hear the end of it. "Harry," she said. "Harry." Vegeta tried the word in his mouth like a coin he was testing the weight of. He looked down at the sleeping child, and for a moment, in the gray light, with no one watching but Bulma and no enemy within 1,000 kilometers to perform his hardness for, he let the look on his face be the one that was actually there. "All right," he said quietly to the baby, not to her. "Harry." The baby slept on, fist in his collar, and did not know yet that it had been chosen. They argued about everything in those first weeks, which Bulma decided was probably the only normal thing about the whole arrangement. She won the argument about the doctor. A discreet old family physician came, examined the child, pronounced him a healthy boy of perhaps 15 months, frowned at the lightning scar, and said it would likely never fully fade, and asked no questions he was paid handsomely not to ask. She won the argument about the nursery, which she installed in a sunlit room down the hall from Vegeta's over his objection that a warrior needed no nursery, an objection he abandoned the first night the baby woke screaming, and he discovered that he could not, in fact, settle it by force of will. She lost the argument about the schedule. "He's a baby," she said, holding Harry on her hip while Vegeta stood in the door of the gravity chamber with his arms folded. "He is not getting up at dawn. Everyone in this house gets up at dawn. You get up at dawn. I sleep like a human being." "He'll get up at dawn," Vegeta said, "because the body learns what you teach it, and the sooner you teach it, the cleaner it learns. I'm not putting him in the chamber, woman. I'm not insane. He'll sit. He'll watch. He'll grow used to the feeling of being near power before he's old enough to flinch from it. That's all I'm asking." And so it began, the strangest ritual the Capsule Corporation grounds had ever hosted. Every morning before the sun cleared the mountains, the Prince of all Saiyans carried a baby out to the white dome of the gravity chamber, set him in a padded seat just outside the open hatch where the field couldn't reach, and trained where the child could see him. Hours of it. Brutal, beautiful, punishing hours. Vegeta hanging in air heavier than any earthling could stand and driving his body against it until the sweat flew off him in arcs. And through all of it the baby watched, unblinking, the green eyes tracking every strike like a metronome tracking time. "You're going to give that child a complex," Bulma said, bringing out coffee one morning to find Harry babbling and slapping his fat palms together in rhythm with Vegeta's blows. "I'm giving him a standard," Vegeta said, and did not break stride. He would never have admitted that he had come to need it. That on the mornings he carried the warm weight out into the cold and set it where it could see him, the old blade in his chest turned a little less sharply against the grain. That when he came out of the chamber soaked and aching, and the baby reached for him with both fists and a shriek of welcome, something in him that had been clenched since the day his planet died unclenched a finger's width and stayed that way until noon. He would never have admitted it, and Bulma never made him, and that was the closest thing to mercy she knew how to give a man like him. Other rituals accreted, one by one, the way they do in any house with a child in it. There was how Harry would not sleep unless the blanket with the stag was tucked under his chin, no matter how many finer blankets Bulma bought to replace it. There was the cracked tile in the floor of the front room, where Harry at 13 months had brought a training weight down with both hands and a roar and split the stone, and which Vegeta forbade anyone to repair, walking over it every day like a marker on a road. There was the too big shirt, one of Bulma's, an old soft thing the child had claimed off a laundry pile and refused to surrender, so that for a season Harry toddled around the compound swimming in a garment that hung to his ankles, and the Prince of all Saiyans never once said a word against it. He told himself these were tolerances. A commander permitted his soldiers their comforts to keep them whole. He told himself this, and he tucked the stag blanket under the chin each night with his own scarred hands, and he did not examine the matter further. The first time the second fire came on its own, Vegeta nearly killed a man over it. Harry was perhaps too. He had learned to walk by walking after Vegeta, hands fisting in the legs of his training suit, falling and getting back up with a doggedness that pleased the prince more than he would say aloud, because it was the one thing he had to teach that the child seemed to have been born already knowing, that you got up, you always got up. Harry fell 100 times a day and got up 101 times, scowling, determined, never once content to stay down, and Vegeta watched him do it and allowed himself the nearest thing to peace he permitted. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Harry sat on the floor of the front room, stacking the heavy grip weights into a tower taller than himself, a campaign he prosecuted with the grim focus of a general. Across the room, a maintenance technician Bulma had hired stood up a ladder, working on a light fitting, and the ladder slipped. It came down toward the child, 200 pounds of aluminum and a grown man, falling. Vegeta was across the room and not close enough. He moved faster than any human eye could follow, and even so he knew in the half-second of it that he would be a hair too slow, that he would reach the spot a fraction after the ladder did, and the knowing of it opened a hole in him so sudden and so total that he would carry the memory of it for years. He never had to close the distance. The air over Harry's head went white, not Kai. Vegeta knew Kai, and this was the other thing, the storm thing, the energy he'd smelled in a ruined nursery and not felt since, banked and silent inside the child all this time. It came out of Harry in a single uncontrolled pulse, and the falling ladder, the falling man, the falling everything stopped a meter above the upturned face, hung there shivering against all reason, then flung itself sideways across the room to crash into the far wall while the technician landed in a sprawl on the carpet, unhurt, white as paper, gibbering. Harry sat in the middle of the floor, his tower scattered, blinking up at the empty air where the end had been, then looked at his own two hands, turning them over, studying them, then looked at Vegeta and laughed. Vegeta did not laugh. He crossed the room, scooped the child up, ran his hands over him for any mark and found none, and only then, with Harry safe against his chest and squirming to be put down so he could rebuild his tower, did he turn his attention to the technician, who was still on the floor making sounds that were not words. "You," Vegeta said, in the voice he had not used since he came to Earth, the voice that had ended worlds, nearly crushed him. Bulma got there in time. She got there as she always somehow did, putting herself bodily between the prince and the terrified employee, both hands flat on the breastplate of his armor, saying his name, saying it's not his fault. The ladder slipped. Look at me, look. The baby's fine, Vegeta, look at him, until the killing pressure went out of the air and thinned to nothing. And Vegeta stood in the middle of the room, breathing hard with a giggling child in one arm, and the leftover taste of a slaughter he had not committed in his mouth. Later, when the technician had been paid an obscene sum and sent home and Harry had been fed and bathed and put down for the night, Bulma found Vegeta in the dark of the gravity chamber, not training, only standing in the cold field with his hands at his sides. "You felt it before," she said, "on the blanket, when you found him. You said it was leaking out of him. It's the other energy, the storm." He turned his head. In the dim light, his face gave nothing back. It's still in him. It came out to save him. He didn't aim it. He didn't know he had it. He was in danger and it answered, the way Kai never does, the way nothing I have ever seen does. His voice dropped. "Kai is a fire you build. This thing is a second fire and it builds itself, and it is loyal to him in a manner I don't have words for. It loves him. I felt it choose him over the laws of the world." Bulma had no answer to that. It was, she thought, the strangest sentence she had ever heard him speak, and possibly the truest. "What are you going to do?" she said. "What I told you I would." Vegeta looked out through the chamber's open hatch toward the dark hall, toward the room where the child slept with both fists curled under his chin. "I'm going to teach him to use both. The fire he builds and the fire that builds itself. I'm going to make them one thing in him, because separately they are gifts, and together they will be a weapon the universe has not seen before." His voice went lower still, and the next words were not for her at all. "Whatever came for him in that house, if it ever comes again, it will find that the thing it tried to kill grew up, and it will find that the thing it tried to kill was not alone." The first word Harry ever spoke was not a name. Bulma had spent months coaching him toward Mama, which he had no use for, and then toward the various soft earth syllables a child is supposed to want, and Harry had listened to all of it with the patient skepticism of someone humoring a tutor and given nothing back. Then one cold morning at the edge of the gravity chamber, watching Vegeta drag himself up off the floor of the field after a fall that would have broken a truck, the child leaned forward in his padded seat, pointed one fat finger, and said with great clarity, "Again." Vegeta froze, half-risen, sweat dripping off the end of his nose onto the steel. "Again," Harry said and clapped his hands once, a commander issuing an order to his army of one. The Prince of all Saiyans climbed the rest of the way to his feet, looked at the child through the open hatch, and laughed, a short, rough sound that startled a flock of birds out of the trees, a sound Bulma swore afterward she had never heard him make before or since. Again, he agreed. He bumped the gravity dial up a notch with the back of his hand and threw himself at the heavier air, and from the seat outside the field, a high voice kept time. Again, again, again. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself it was an accident of an infant's mouth landing on the one word it had heard most. He knew better, and he turned the dial up, and he trained until the sun was high, with an audience of one demanding he do it once more. By the time Harry was 4, he could feel things no earthling child had any business feeling, and Vegeta decided it was time to teach him what they were. They sat across from each other on the cold floor of the front room, over the cracked tile, the prince cross-legged and patient in a manner he never managed with adults, the child mirroring his posture with the deadly seriousness of someone who has waited his whole short life to be taken seriously. "Close your eyes," Vegeta said. "Why? Because I told you to. That's not a reason." It was an old argument by now, and Vegeta found, against his own better sense, that he had come to look forward to it. "Because you see with your eyes," he said, "and there are things your eyes can't show you, and I'm going to teach you to see them another way. Close your eyes, brat." Harry closed his eyes. "There's a fire in you," Vegeta said, low and even, the rough edge gone out of his voice the way it only ever went for this. "Everything alive has it. Most things never learn it's there. It sits behind your ribs and makes your blood move and your lungs pull, and it asks for nothing, and it will go to its grave never having been used for anything but keeping you breathing. That is a waste. We do not waste, find it. How? Stop asking how and feel." Harry sat very still, brow furrowed under the lightning scar, breathing the way Vegeta had taught him, slow and from the belly, and for a while there was nothing in the room but the wind against the windows and the patience of a teacher who had crossed the stars to find this exact child and would not rush him now. Then the child made a sound, surprise and triumph at once. "There," he whispered, eyes still shut. "It's warm. It's in my hands. Hold it there." Vegeta leaned in, his own hands hovering a few centimeters off the child's, close enough to feel the heat building between them. "Don't grab, you can't grab fire. You cup it. You ask it to come, and because it is yours it comes. Now, open your hands and let me see it." Harry opened his hands. Light pooled in the upturned palms, pale and unsteady, guttering like a candle held in a draught, the rawest scrap of Kai that had ever been deliberately summoned on that or any world. It lasted 3 seconds. To anyone who knew what they were looking at, it was no more than a flicker. And threaded all through it, braided into the warm Saiyan light without the child doing anything to invite it, ran a second color, cooler and stranger, the storm blue of the energy that had broken a killing curse in a ruined nursery, leaning into the Kai like a thing coming home. Vegeta looked at the 2 fires burning together in his student's hands and did not speak for a moment, because nothing in his long, brutal education had prepared him for the sight of them choosing, on their own, to be one. The light went out. Harry sagged, drained by 3 seconds of it, and opened his eyes and looked up to learn whether he had done well. "Was that right?" he asked. Vegeta reached out and put his scarred hand flat on the top of the child's head, just once, just for a moment, over the lightning scar, the closest thing to an embrace the Prince of all Saiyans knew how to give. "That was right," he said. "On your feet, we go again." And Harry, who had been told his whole short life by the only parent he had ever known that you always got up, swaying, grinning, and held out his empty hands for more. The years would skip after that. They always do, in a life built around a child. There would be mornings without number in the cold before dawn, and 1,000 falls and 1,001 risings, and the slow, patient, unglamorous construction of a warrior out of a baby who had survived the unsurvivable and not learned, yet, to be afraid. That night Vegeta did not think about the years. He walked the dark hall back to the nursery and stood a while in the doorway, watching the rise and fall of the chest under the blanket with the stag, the lightning scar faint in the moonlight, the green eyes shut and twitching with whatever dreams a creature that age dreams. "On your feet," he said softly to the sleeping shape, practicing a thing he would say 10,000 times in the years to come. "Always, brat, on your feet." Harry slept, and the second fire slept in him, banked and waiting, and outside the window the stars wheeled in their slow, indifferent arc over a planet that had no idea, yet, what had just been carried down into it out of the dark. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. The weight of the world. On the morning of his 6th birthday, Harry was allowed inside the gravity chamber for the first time, and he had been awake since 3 in the morning waiting for it. He sat at the kitchen table in the dark with his hands flat on the wood, the way Vegeta had taught him to sit when he wanted something badly and did not want it to show, and he watched the window for the first gray line over the mountains. Bulma found him there when she came down for coffee, swimming in the too big shirt that no longer hung quite to his ankles, his black hair standing up in every direction the way it did no matter what anyone did to it. "You're going to wear a hole in that table," she said. "He said when I turned 6. Harry did not look away from the window. "I'm 6 now. It's been 6 since midnight. It's been 6 for 6 hours, and you've spent all of them staring at the dark." She set a glass of milk in front of him, which he ignored, and ruffled the impossible hair which he tolerated. "He's not going to start early just because you didn't sleep. You know that, right? He'll start exactly when he said, not a minute before. I know." A grin pulled at the corner of his mouth, and he killed it, because warriors did not grin about their training, a rule he had made up himself and enforced with great severity. "That's why I'm ready now, so I don't make him wait." Bulma looked at the small, fierce, sleep-starved person at her table and thought, not for the first time, that whatever Vegeta had carried home out of that ruin 5 years ago, he had not made it up. The child had arrived with that flint already in him. All Vegeta had done was teach it which way to strike. The gray line came over the mountains at last. Harry was off the chair and at the back door before the light had finished arriving, and Vegeta was already there, already waiting, arms folded in the cold, his breath smoking. "You're late," Vegeta said. "You said dawn. It's dawn. A warrior who arrives when the battle starts is a warrior who arrives too late." But there was no bite under the words this morning, only the dry routine of an argument they both enjoyed. Vegeta turned and walked toward the white dome, and Harry fell into step at his side, taking 2 strides for every one of the Prince-S, and neither of them said anything about what day it was, because saying it would have made it soft, and they had an understanding about that. The chamber breathed cold, recycled air. The dome curved overhead, white and seamless, and at its center, the round control console glowed with the dial Harry had stared at his whole life from the outside. Vegeta stopped beside it and put one finger on the dial. "You've watched me do this for 6 years, he said. "Tell me what it does." "It makes everything heavier. Your arms, your legs, the air, your blood, everything." Harry had the whole speech ready. He had been rehearsing it for weeks. "Earth's gravity is 1. When you go up to 50, everything weighs 50 times what it should. If you're not ready, it crushes you flat. If you are ready, it makes you stronger because the body learns what you teach it, and you're teaching it that one is easy." The line of Vegeta's mouth did the thing that was not quite a smile. "And what do you think I'm going to set it to for you, on your first morning, at 6 years old, weighing what you weigh?" 50, said Harry with total confidence. 2. Outrage, immediate and total. 2 is barely anything. I could do 2 right now, standing here. I could do 2 in my sleep. Then 2 will be easy, and you'll be bored, and you'll learn the most important thing there is to learn in this room, which is patience. Vegeta turned the dial. Something deep in the floor hummed and woke, and the air changed, and Harry felt his own weight double, felt his arms grow strange and slow, felt the floor reach up and lean on him through the soles of his feet. "There, 2, now, walk to me." It was not barely anything. Harry took 1 step, and his leg did not come up when he told it to. He took a second, and the chamber tilted, and he went down onto one knee on the cold steel with a thump that jarred his teeth. 2 times his own small weight, hung on a body that had never carried more than one, and it was on him like a hand pressing flat between his shoulder blades. He looked up. Vegeta had not moved to help him. Vegeta never moved to help him. Vegeta stood 3 meters away with his arms folded and watched and waited and said the thing he always said. "On your feet, brat." Harry got to his feet. His knees shook. He took another step, and another, leaning into the weight the way Vegeta had taught him to lean into the wind off the mountains, finding the angle where the load went down through his bones instead of folding them, and he crossed the 3 meters 1 staggering step at a time, and when he reached the prince he was breathing hard and soaked through and grinning openly now, the rule about grinning forgotten. Vegeta put his hand on the top of the black head, once briefly, as he had since the child could stand. "Again," he said, "back the way you came, and this time don't fight the floor. The floor isn't your enemy. The floor is the teacher. Listen to it." Harry turned around and walked back into the weight, and the sun came up over the mountains outside, and inside the white dome, a 6-year-old learned the first true lesson of his life, which was that strength is not a thing you are given but a thing you go and take, one impossible step after another, from a world that would rather you stayed down. After that first morning, the shape of Harry's days set like cooling steel, and it never changed, and he came to love it the way you love a thing that is hard and entirely your own. Dawn in the chamber, always, the dial a notch heavier every few months, never more, because patience was the lesson under all the other lessons. Then breakfast, which with a growing Saiyan in the house was a campaign Bulma waged against her own pantry and lost daily, Harry putting away a stack of food that would have foundered a grown soldier, while Vegeta corrected the angle of his wrist between his own enormous mouthfuls. Then lessons Bulma insisted on, letters and sums at the kitchen table, which Vegeta grumbled had never won a single battle in the history of the universe, and which he permitted anyway, because Bulma had won that argument as she won most of them, by being right and refusing to stop saying so. Then the woods in the afternoon, the sensing games, the long hunts, then the dark and sleep and the dawn again. He kept account in those years of his falls and his risings. He scratched it into the underside of the cracked tile in the front room with the edge of a training weight, a private ledger no one else knew about, a mark for every time the floor or the gravity or his own teacher put him down, and a mark beside it for every time he got up. There was always one more rising than there were falls. He made sure of it. Vegeta had told him once early that the only number in any fight that ever mattered was the last one, the count of who was still standing when the dust came down, and Harry had taken the lesson into himself as he took everything Vegeta gave him completely and built his whole young life around making the last number his. The too big shirt finally wore through to rags the winter he was 7, and he would not throw it out. He folded what was left of it and kept it in the drawer by his bed, next to the blanket with the stag, two soft worn things from two different beginnings, and he never spoke about either one, and neither did Vegeta, who knew the drawer was there and what was in it and walked past it every night without a word, because some things you guard best by pretending not to see them. Bulma's son was born when Harry was 6.5, and Harry decided on sight that the baby was his responsibility. Nobody had asked him to. He simply appeared at the side of the crib the morning they brought Trunks home and stationed himself there with his arms folded in an exact imitation of Vegeta, studying the red wrinkled scrap of a thing the way a commander studies a new recruit. Trunks, for his part, looked back with the same flat, unblinking Saiyan stare that Harry himself had once turned on a prince in a ruined nursery, and something passed between them, older than either of them, that no one in the room could name. "He's very small," Harry reported gravely. "That's how they come," Bulma said. "He has purple hair. Why does he have purple hair?" "Because his mother is a genius and his father is a disaster, and that's what you get." Harry considered this. "Is he going to train?" "That," said Bulma, "is a conversation for when he can hold his own head up and not 1 second before, so don't get any ideas." But Harry had already gotten ideas. From that morning he took it upon himself to guard the baby, a duty he interpreted with the seriousness of a sentry on a fortress wall. He stood watch while Trunks slept. He reported, with great precision, on the volume and frequency of the baby's crying. When Trunks was old enough to sit up and grab, Harry sat on the floor with him for hours and let the small purple-haired tyrant yank fistfuls of his hair, never once complaining, because, as he explained to a baffled Bulma, pain was good practice and the baby had a strong grip, and a strong grip was the foundation of everything. Vegeta watched all of this from the doorway and said nothing, and the not saying had a particular quality to it that Bulma had learned to read over the years. He had carried one orphan home out of the dark and built his whole hard heart around it. Watching that orphan stand guard over his blood son, watching the two of them turn into something that had no proper word, brothers who shared no drop of the same blood and would have walked into fire for each other anyway, did something to the prince that he would have died before admitting and could not entirely hide. "He's good with him," Bulma said one evening, joining Vegeta in the doorway where Harry sat on the nursery floor solemnly explaining Kai to a 1-year-old who was trying to eat his own foot. "He's practicing command," Vegeta said, "responsibility for something weaker than yourself. It's the first thing a leader learns." "Sure it is." Bulma leaned her shoulder against the frame. "That's all it is. What else would it be?" "Nothing, Vegeta." She watched Harry catch Trunks just before the baby toppled sideways, watched him set the child upright with hands that had been taught to break stone and had learned, somewhere along the way, to be gentle. Nothing at all. The Kai-sensing games began in the woods above the compound, and they were Harry's favorite thing in the world, which was exactly why Vegeta used them. "You want to play," Vegeta would say, in the tone of a man granting a tremendous concession, "so we'll play, but everything is training. There is no such thing as not training. You understand me, brat? Even your games will make you stronger, or they will be a waste, and we do not waste." The game was simple and it was brutal. Vegeta would suppress his Kai down to a whisper and vanish into the pines, and Harry would have 30 seconds and then he would have to find him, using nothing but the sense Vegeta had spent years sharpening in him, the inner ear that heard the heat of living things. If Harry found him, they ate well that night, whatever Harry wanted. If Harry failed, they ran the mountain until Harry's legs gave out, and then they ran it again. At first Harry failed and failed and failed. Vegeta could fold his enormous power down so small that it disappeared into the noise of the forest, the squirrels and the birds in the slow green hum of the trees, and Harry would stand in the middle of the woods with his eyes shut and his fists clenched, reaching, finding nothing, until the 30 seconds ran out and the running began. But the body learns what you teach it. By the time he was 7, Harry could stand at the tree line and feel the whole mountain at once, every warm flickering life on it laid out in his mind like lights on a dark map, and he could pick the one cold absence where Vegeta had pressed himself down to nothing, because by then Harry had learned the secret nobody had told him. You don't look for the power. Anyone can feel power. You look for the hole the hidden power leaves, the place where the forest's noise bends around something that is trying too hard to be silent. "Found you?" Harry said, dropping out of a pine directly onto the boulder where Vegeta crouched, suppressed and motionless, and the prince's head came up sharply, because Harry had not just found him, the kid had stalked him, had circled downwind through the canopy and come at him from above where even a Saiyan's senses ran thin. "How?" Vegeta said. "You were too quiet." Harry was breathing hard and pleased with himself and not bothering to hide it. "Everything else up here makes noise. You made a quiet." "So I looked for the quiet." Vegeta stared at him for a long moment, and then he stood, and he did a thing he almost never did, which was to reach out and grip Harry's shoulder hard as he would have gripped a comrade's. "That," he said, "is the difference between a fighter and a warrior. A fighter hits what's in front of him. A warrior understands the whole field and makes it his." He let go. "We eat well tonight. You earned it. What do you want?" "Everything," said Harry, who had the appetite of 3 grown men and the Saiyan metabolism to justify it. And Vegeta laughed his short, rough laugh, and they walked down the mountain together in the failing light, the prince and the child he would not call his son, and the trees closed quiet behind them. But there was one part of the game Harry never told Vegeta about, because he did not understand it himself. Sometimes, when he reached out with his senses, the second fire reached out with him. It went where his attention went, the cool, storm-colored thing that lived alongside his Kai, and it touched the world in a way his Kai could not. Once hunting Vegeta through the pines, Harry had wanted very badly to see around the trunk of a great tree, and the wanting had done something, and for half a heartbeat he had seen around it, seen the empty clearing on the other side as though his eye had stepped out of his head and gone around to look. Once he had reached for a pinecone too high to climb to, and it had come down into his open hand without his hand moving from his side. Small things, wrong things, things that Kai did not do and could not do. He did not tell Vegeta, not because he was hiding it, but because he had no words for it, and a boy of 7 cannot describe a thing he has no words for. He only knew that he had 2 fires in him, and one of them obeyed the rules he was being taught, and the other one obeyed nothing but his own wanting, and that the second one frightened him a little, in the way that a thing too big to understand frightens you, and that he would have to understand it eventually. Eventually came sooner than he expected. It happened on a gray afternoon in the front room, and it happened because of Trunks. The baby was 2 by then, walking, getting into everything, and he had gotten into the worst possible thing. He had toddled out the open back door toward the slope behind the compound, the steep one, the one that fell away 40 feet to the rocks of the dry creek bed below. Bulma was in her lab. Vegeta was on the far side of the mountain, a speck against the clouds, training. And Harry, 7 years old, looked up from the floor and saw the back door standing open, and the baby gone through it, and he was on his feet and through the door in a heartbeat. And he came out into the gray light just in time to see Trunks reach the lip of the slope and lose his footing and go over. There was no time to reach him. Harry knew it the way Vegeta had known it about the ladder, knew it in the cold, clean math of distance and speed, that he was 4 strides away and the baby was already falling, and 4 strides was 3 strides too many. So he did not reach for the baby with his hands. He reached with the other thing. He did not decide to. There was no deciding in it. There was only the falling shape of the little brother he had appointed himself to guard, and a wanting so total it burned out everything else in him, and the second fire came up out of his chest like a wave coming up a beach, faster than thought, faster than Kai, and it went where his wanting went, and it caught Trunks in the air. The baby stopped falling. He hung over the lip of the slope, 2 feet down, suspended in nothing, his purple hair drifting, his face screwed up to cry, held in a cradle of cool blue light that came from nowhere and from Harry both at once. And Harry, white-faced, his whole body shaking with the strain of holding a thing he did not know how to hold, walked to the edge on legs that barely worked, and reached down with his actual hands, and the light lifted the baby up to meet them. And then Harry had his brother in his arms, and the light went out, and the 2 of them sat down hard in the wet grass while the world spun. That was how Vegeta found them. dropping out of the sky a moment later with the back door's open mouth having pulled at his senses from across the mountain. A 7-year-old sitting in the grass at the edge of a killing drop, soaked in sweat, holding a wailing 2-year-old so tightly that nothing short of death would have pried them apart. Vegeta landed. He took in the open door, the slope, the rocks far below, the position of the bodies, and read the whole story off the ground in under a second, as he read everything. "He went over," Harry said. His voice did not sound like his own. "He went over the edge and I couldn't reach him, so he stopped because he did not have the word. He had never had the word. I held him, with the other fire. I held him in the air and I brought him back." Vegeta knelt down in the grass in front of them, armor and all, and for once in his life he did not say anything hard. He looked at the child he had carried out of one ruin, holding the son of his own blood out of the jaws of another, and he reached out and put his hand on the back of Harry's neck, and he pulled Harry's forehead against his armored shoulder, the closest thing to an embrace he knew, and he held both of them there in the wet grass for a long moment while the gray sky pressed down. "You held him in the air," Vegeta said at last low, against the black hair. "I didn't know I could." The prince's hand tightened on the back of Harry's neck. "Neither did I. That's the storm. That's the second fire, the one that builds itself, the one I told you about when you were small. It came when you needed it. It came to protect what you love." He drew back and looked Harry in the eyes, and his face was as serious as Harry had ever seen it. "Listen to me. Most warriors spend their whole lives trying to find a power that strong, and they die without it, and you reached out and it was just there, because it has been in you since before I found you. Do you understand what that makes you?" "No," Harry whispered. "It makes you the most dangerous thing I have ever trained," Vegeta said. "And the only question left, the only question that has ever mattered, is whether you'll be strong enough to be trusted with it." He stood and he pulled Harry up by the arm, and he took the still hiccuping Trunks into the crook of his own elbow with a tenderness that he immediately undercut by scowling. "So, we have more work to do than I thought, starting tonight. Tonight, but I'm tired, yes. You saved your brother's life with a power you can't control, and it nearly emptied you out, and that is exactly why we start tonight. Because the enemy will not wait for you to be rested. The enemy will come when you are tired and frightened and at the end of yourself. And on that day, you will need to do what you just did and stay standing afterward." Vegeta turned toward the house with the baby on his arm. "On your feet, brat, we're going to learn what your second fire is. Both of us, together." And Harry, swaying, emptied out, more frightened than he had been in his whole short life and more certain than he had ever been that he was exactly where he belonged, got to his feet and followed his teacher into the house. They learned it slowly, over months, the way you learn anything worth knowing. Vegeta, who understood Kai the way a master swordsman understands a blade, found himself a student again alongside his pupil, because the second fire answered to none of the rules he had spent a lifetime mastering. Kai was a discipline. You built it through suffering, you shaped it through control, you spent it and it was gone and you built it again. The second fire was nothing like that. It did not deplete the way Kai did. It welled up from somewhere that had no bottom. It did not need to be aimed. It went where Harry's attention and his wanting went, as though it were a part of his mind as much as his body. And it did things that violated everything Vegeta knew about the conservation of power. It moved objects from a distance. It made small things appear in Harry's hand that had been across the room. Once furious in a spar, Harry had thrown a punch that missed, and his opponent, a training drone Bulma had built, had been flung across the chamber anyway, by nothing, by his own pure intention to land the blow. But the second fire was not only force, and that was the part that unsettled Vegeta the most, because force he understood. One evening Bulma's favorite teapot, a delicate painted thing her own mother had given her, slipped off the edge of the counter, and Harry, 3 rooms away, felt it fall as he felt everything fall now, and without rising from the floor he reached out with the cool blue thing behind his ribs and not only caught the teapot, but finding it already cracked from the lip down its side, mended it. He did not decide to mend it. He only did not want it broken, and the wanting ran down the seam of the crack and closed it, china flowing back into china, the painted flowers lining up petal to petal, until the pot hung whole in the air and drifted back up to the counter, good as the day it was thrown. Bulma found it there and assumed she had imagined the chip. Harry, pale and unsteady on the floor of the next room, knew that she had not. He told Vegeta that night because mending was stranger than breaking and the stranger things frightened him more. "Kai cannot do that," Vegeta said. He turned the mended teapot over in his scarred hands, hunting for the seam that was no longer there. "Kai destroys, or it shields, or it moves. It does not heal. It does not put broken things back the way they were. Whatever your second fire is, brat, it is older and deeper than power, and it answers to mercy as quickly as it answers to rage. He set the teapot down with a care he showed almost nothing on this earth, which means you are going to learn to be merciful on purpose, the same way you are learning to be still on purpose. Both fires, both disciplines, there is no part of you I intend to leave untrained. It's not Kai, Vegeta said, sitting cross-legged on the chamber floor across from Harry, the two of them sweat-soaked at the end of a long session. Kai is the fire of the body. This is something else. The fire of the will, maybe. Whatever you most deeply mean, it makes real. He frowned. That's a terrifying thing to put in a child. A child means terrible things all the time. You wanted that drone destroyed, and it nearly was. I know. Harry pulled his knees up. Sometimes when I'm angry, I can feel it wanting to come out, and I don't always want it to. Then that, Vegeta said, is what we train, not the power. You have the power more than you know what to do with. We train the wanting. We train you to mean only what you choose to mean in the worst moment when everything in you is screaming. That's the hardest discipline there is, and most grown warriors never master it, and you're going to master it before you're a man, because you have no choice. A weapon that fires whatever its holder feels is not a weapon. It's an accident waiting to happen. He leaned forward. I will not raise an accident. I'm raising a warrior, so, from the top, build your Kai, hold it steady, and this time when I make you angry and I'm going to make you angry, you keep the second fire still. You let nothing out that you didn't choose. You're going to make me angry on purpose. I'm very good at it, Vegeta said, as your mother in the lab will tell you. He rolled up off the floor into a fighting crouch. On your feet, we do this moving. Anyone can sit still and stay calm. I want you calm while I'm taking your head off. What followed was the hardest hour of Harry's life to that point. Vegeta came at him slow, then not slow at all, raining down blows that Harry blocked and slipped and ate when he was a half-beat late, and the whole time the prince talked, a low venomous stream engineered to find every soft place in a boy and lean on it. He called Harry weak. He called him slow. He said the parents who had died for him would be ashamed to see how little he had made of the gift. Every word was a lie and a test at once, a hook thrown out to see whether the second fire would rise to the bait, and Harry felt it rise, felt the storm come up his spine wanting to answer, wanting to fling this cruel laughing teacher across the chamber the way it had flung the drone. And he held it. He took the blows and held the storm down behind his ribs and answered the cruelty with nothing but his fists, and somewhere in the middle of it the rage burned off and left only the work, the clean cold work of fighting well. And when Vegeta finally stepped back, Harry was still on his feet, blood on his lip, the second fire quiet exactly where he had put it. Vegeta looked at him for a moment. Good, he said, just the one word. And it was worth more to Harry than 100 of anyone else's speeches. Kakarot came to the compound on a clear morning that spring, and he came as he did everything, without warning, dropping out of the sky into the yard with 2 fingers still pressed to his forehead from the technique that had carried him halfway across the continent in the space of a blink. Vegeta, he called, cheerful as sunrise. Hey Vegeta, you home? Bulma said you'd be. He stopped. He had felt something, and his grin faltered and reassembled into a more careful shape, and he turned slowly toward the gravity chamber, where Harry had just come to the open hatch to see who was shouting. Whoa, Goku said softly. Who's this? Vegeta was there in an instant, putting himself half between Harry and the visitor, an old reflex he did not trouble to examine. None of your business, Kakarot. He's got, Goku tipped his head, studying Harry with the frank open curiosity of a man who had never once in his life learned to hide what he was thinking. He's got 2 of them, 2 energies. There's Kai, that's normal, that's a strong one for a kid, you've been working him hard. But there's this other thing under it, all cold and bright and kind of twisty. His eyes went round. I've never felt anything like it. What is that? That, Vegeta said, is mine to train and yours to leave alone. But Harry had already stepped out of the chamber, because a stranger who could feel the second fire was the most interesting thing that had ever landed in the yard. He walked straight up to the tall, friendly Saiyan and looked up at him, unafraid, with the fearlessness he turned on everything. You can feel it, the other fire. Nobody can feel it except Vegeta. Sure, I can feel it. Goku dropped into a crouch to put himself at Harry's level, which startled Harry. Grown warriors did not usually crouch for him. It's all through you, like a second heartbeat. Does it do things? It does whatever I really mean, Harry said gravely. That's the hard part. Vegeta says a weapon that fires whatever you feel isn't a weapon. It's an accident waiting to happen, so we train the wanting, not the power. Goku glanced up at Vegeta with something close to respect, which Vegeta received with a scowl. That's actually really smart, Vegeta. Don't sound so surprised. Can I see? Goku asked the kid. Just a little. I won't tell anybody. Harry looked to Vegeta because he did nothing in his training without the prince's leave, and Vegeta, after a moment, gave it, the smallest tilt of his head. So Harry held out his hand, palm up, and called the second fire up slow and deliberate, exactly as he had been taught, meaning only the one small thing, a light. Cool blue brightness pooled in his palm, steady now, no longer guttering the way it had when he was 4. And then, because he meant it to, it lifted free of his hand and floated, a little sphere of storm-colored light, and drifted in a slow circle around Goku's astonished head before settling back into Harry's palm and winking out. For a moment, Goku said nothing at all. Then he laughed, delighted, and clapped Harry on the shoulder hard enough to rock him on his heels. That's amazing. Gohan can't do anything like that, and Gohan's got more raw power than any kid I've ever met. Vegeta, do you know what you've got here? I know exactly what I have, Vegeta said, and there was a thing in his voice that made Goku look at him, because under the usual hardness ran something that almost never surfaced, a fierce and guarded pride, banked behind his ribs the same way Harry guarded his own second fire. I have the finest student either of our peoples has ever produced. And by the time he is grown, Kakarot, he is going to leave your Gohan, and your other children, and you, and even me, so far behind that we will need a telescope to watch him fight. That a challenge. Goku's grin came roaring back, the eternal hopeful grin of a man who loved nothing in all the world so much as the promise of a good fight somewhere down the road. It's a fact. The corner of Vegeta's mouth moved. But yes, also a challenge. Bulma made them all stay for dinner, which, with 3 full-blooded Saiyans and a half-Saiyan toddler at one table, was less a meal than a natural disaster observed at close range. Food vanished off the serving plates faster than she could carry them in. Harry and Goku discovered a shared and bottomless capacity for noodles, and a shared inability to stop talking about technique while their mouths were full. Trunks, 2 years old and furious to be the smallest warrior present, expressed his opinion of the proceedings by flinging a fistful of rice at his father, who caught it out of the air without looking and ate it without comment. Vegeta said little. He sat at the head of his strange, borrowed family, and watched the child he had carried out of a ruin trade insults and noodles with the rival he could not beat. And he did not smile exactly, but the old blade in his chest lay quiet in its sheath, and for one whole evening he did not reach for it. When Goku finally left, 2 fingers to his forehead, gone between one word and the next, Harry stood in the yard and looked at the empty place in the air where he had been. He's strong, Harry said, stronger than you, for now. Vegeta put his hand on the black head. Get inside, we start early. The night before Harry turned 8, he asked the question he had been carrying for years. They were on the roof of the main residence, where they sometimes went when the chamber was too small for the kind of talking that needed sky. Below them, the lights of West City smeared the horizon orange. Above them, the stars were out, the same indifferent stars, and Harry lay on his back on the warm tiles with his hands behind his head and watched them, and Vegeta sat beside him with his forearms on his knees, and for a while neither of them said anything. Where did I come from? Harry said, finally, to the stars. Vegeta did not pretend to misunderstand. He had known the question was coming for years. He had dreaded it in the quiet way he dreaded the few things he could not solve by getting stronger. A house, he said, far away, on the other side of the world, in a country full of green hedges and people who think they're safe. He kept his eyes on the city. I felt your power flare across the whole planet one night when you were a baby, so I went to see what it was. And I found a broken house and 2 people who had died protecting you, and you sitting up in your crib with a fresh cut on your head, not crying, glaring at me like you were deciding whether I was worth the trouble of fighting. Harry was very still. My parents, I never knew their names. There was a name on your blanket, Harry, that was all. Vegeta's voice was level and low. Something came for you that night, brat. Something strong and cold and cowardly, the kind of thing that kills children in their beds because it's afraid to face anything that can hit back. It killed your father downstairs. It killed your mother in front of your crib because she would not move out of its way, and then it tried to kill you. He turned his head and looked down at Harry in the starlight. And it couldn't. You were 1 year old and something tried to erase you from the world and you threw it back so hard it broke. That's the storm. That's the second fire. It came up to save you before you could even speak, and it's been in you ever since, waiting. Harry lay still and looked at the stars and felt the night turn around him. Did you kill it? He asked. The thing that came for me. Vegeta's jaw worked. It was already gone when I got there. Whatever it was, it didn't die that night. It broke and it ran, and it's out there somewhere in that green country across the world, broken and waiting and getting strong again, the way broken things do. He looked back at the city. That's the real reason I train you the way I do. Not for glory, not even for pride, though there's plenty of that. I train you because one day that thing is going to remember you're alive, and it's going to come back to finish what it started, and when it does, I am going to be standing behind you, and you are going to be too strong for it to touch. That's the promise I made to your mother's body in that ruin, that you wouldn't waste what she died to save." His voice roughened. "I don't make many promises, I keep the ones I make." Harry sat up. The wind off the mountains moved his hair. He looked at the hard, scarred profile of the only parent he had ever known, the prince who had pulled him out of one ruin and spent 8 years building him into something that could never be put in another, and he understood, in the wordless way children understand the truest things, exactly what he was being given, and exactly what it cost the giver. "I won't waste it," Harry said. "I know you won't, and when it comes back, we'll be ready." Vegeta stood and held out his hand, scarred and broad, and pulled Harry to his feet, and they stood together on the roof under the indifferent stars, the two of them, the last prince of a dead world and the lost son of another, bound by nothing but choice, which is the only binding that ever held. "On your feet," Vegeta said, though Harry was already standing. "Tomorrow you're 8. Tomorrow we go to 3. 3. Harry's outrage was instant and delighted. 3 is nothing, I've been doing 2 for 2 years, I could do 5, I could do 10, 3, said Vegeta, walking toward the edge of the roof. "And patience, always patience, brat. The mountain doesn't care how fast you want to climb it, it only cares whether you're still climbing in the morning." He stepped off the roof and dropped into the dark, and Harry ran to the edge and leapt after him without a moment's hesitation, as he did everything, as he had thrown himself after a falling brother and into a doubled world, and the second fire flickered in him as he fell, cool and bright in his, and he laughed all the way down. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Blood and pride at 90 times Earth's gravity. The air itself was a weight, and Harry had learned to breathe it the way a swimmer learns to breathe the sea. He was 11 now, and lean, and harder than any child his age had a right to be, and he stood at the center of the white dome with the dial reading 90 and 4 combat drones circling him at the speed Bulma's engineers had sworn was the upper limit of the machines before they tore themselves apart. The drones did not care about gravity. Harry did. Every block cost him double what it should, every step had to be torn up out of a floor that wanted to keep his feet, and the 4 machines knew it and pressed it, darting and firing, hurting him toward the moment when the weight would finally win. It did not win. He had decided years ago that it would not. The first drone came in high and Harry went under it, the motion grinding against 90 gravities, and came up inside its arc, and put his fist through its housing before it could correct. The second and third fired together, twin lances of light, and he caught the first on a crossed forearm and let the second past his ear so close it singed hair, and he was already moving, already inside the gap between them, and he brought both of them down with a single spinning sweep that the gravity tried to turn into a fall and that he refused to let be a fall. The fourth drone he saved. He always saved one. He let it chase him to the edge of the dome, and then he stopped dead, planted, and let it commit to its strike. And at the last instant he was not where it expected, because he had learned from a prince that the field is yours if you understand it, and he took it apart in the air over his own head and stood in the rain of its pieces, breathing the heavy air, soaked through, still on his feet. The truth was that the regiment had stopped being something done to him years ago and become something he did, a thing as much his own as his name. His body at 11 was a map of it, the flat ropes of muscle that had no business on a child, the white seam of an old scar along one forearm where a drone had caught him at 60G and taught him never to be caught there again, the calluses stacked on calluses. He woke before the dawn now without being woken. He counted his falls and his risings still, scratched under the cracked tile, and the gap between the two numbers only ever grew. There were mornings the heavy air felt almost gentle, and those were the mornings Vegeta turned the dial up, because comfort, the prince said, was the sound a warrior's growth made when it stopped. "Sloppy," said Vegeta from the hatch. "I beat 4 drones at 90G, you beat 4 drones at 90G and let one of them singe you, which at full power would have been your skull and not your hair." Vegeta came in and the field took hold of him, 290 gravities settling onto a frame that had carried far worse, and he walked to the wreckage and nudged a piece of drone with his boot. "You're fast, you're strong, you're better than any human who has ever lived, and that is not the standard, brat. The standard is perfect. The standard is that nothing touches you, ever, because the one time something does is the time it kills you. Again, I'll run the next set myself." Harry wiped blood and sweat off his lip and grinned, because a session where Vegeta took the field himself was a gift, however it was dressed. "At 90, he said, at 100. Vegeta walked to the console and turned the dial, and the world grew heavier, and the Prince of all Saiyans turned to face the 11-year-old he had built out of a ruin and a promise. And I won't be a drone, I'll be trying. Show me what 11 years has bought me. It bought him more than Vegeta let on, though the prince would have bitten through his own tongue before saying so. They fought across the floor of the chamber at 100 gravities, and for the first 3 exchanges Vegeta simply read him, the way a master reads a board before he moves a piece, slipping Harry's strikes with a hand's width to spare and never once striking back, learning Harry's range, his habits, the small tells he had spent years drilling out and never quite buried. Then the prince began to answer, and the answers were lessons written in bruises. A jab Harry didn't see cost him a split eyebrow. A feint he committed to cost him a fist in the ribs that drove the heavy air out of him and put him on one knee. On your feet. Harry got up. He came in low and fast, and Vegeta met him and turned him. And for a span of seconds, the two of them traded at a speed that would have been invisible to any eye on Earth that was not Saiyan, a blur of strike and counter, and slipped guard across a floor where every motion weighed 100 times its honest worth. Vegeta gave ground he did not need to give, testing what the kid would do with it, and Harry took the ground and pressed and overreached, and the prince made him pay for the overreach with an open palm to the sternum that put him down on his back, gasping, the 100 gravities pinning him to the steel like a beetle to a board. You pressed an advantage that wasn't real, Vegeta said, standing over him, not offering a hand. I gave you the ground, I wanted you to take it. A warrior who can't tell a gift from a victory dies taking the gift, on your feet. Harry got up. He always got up, and that Vegeta thought, watching the kid climb out of the gravity yet again with blood sheeting down one side of his face, was the thing none of his drones and none of his dials had given the child, because you could not teach it. You could only fail to crush it. He had spent 11 years swinging the hardest hammer he owned at this small, fierce anvil of a person, waiting for the day it cracked, and it had never cracked, and somewhere in the last year he had stopped waiting for it too and started in the private place where he kept the things he did not examine, to believe that it never would. Harry came in again, and this time he was not the same fighter who had started the exchange. He had been reading too. That was the part Vegeta had not accounted for, the part that made his old soldier's blood move quicker in his veins. Harry had spent 3 exchanges eating punishment and filing away the prince's rhythm, the half-beat hitch in his left guard that Vegeta himself had never noticed, because no one alive had ever been fast enough to make him pay for it. Harry threw a strike at the left guard. Vegeta slipped it, as he always did. And Harry's other fist was already there, in the space the slip created, traveling up under the prince's jaw with the whole 100 gravity weight of Harry behind it, and the cold blue thread of the second fire braided through the blow to make it land. It landed. It was not a hard blow, by the measure of a Saiyan who had traded strikes with gods. It rocked Vegeta's head back perhaps a centimeter, but it landed clean, the first clean strike the kid had ever put on him in 11 years of trying, and the chamber rang with the sudden silence of a thing that had never happened before happening. Harry froze. He had not entirely believed it would work. Vegeta touched his own jaw. He looked at the kid standing white-faced and panting in front of him, fists still up, blood in one eye, waiting to learn whether he had earned a beating or something else. And the prince of all Saiyans did a thing he had done perhaps 4 times since the day he came to Earth. He laughed. It was the rough short bark of a laugh that startled birds, the one Bulma swore he made only twice a decade, and it filled the white dome and bounced off the curved walls, and Harry, after a stunned moment, started laughing too, helpless, exhausted, bleeding, ferociously alive. You felt the hitch in my guard, Vegeta said, when the laugh had run out of him. 11 years and you found the one flaw in a defense that has buried emperors, and you built a trap for it, and you sprang it, and you put the second fire in the blow so I couldn't read it as Kai. He crossed the floor and gripped the back of Harry's neck and pressed his forehead briefly against Harry's bloody one, armor to skin. That, he said low, was perfect. Don't let it go to your head. Do it again. There was a transformation Harry had heard of his whole life and never once seen, and it lived in the house like a third occupant no one discussed. He had assembled it over the years the way children assemble the things adults guard, out of fragments. A word Goku let slip and tried to swallow. The particular stillness that came over Vegeta whenever that word was spoken. The nights Harry woke to an empty house and followed the sound of his teacher to the chamber and watched through the porthole as the prince of all Saiyans hurled himself against 100 gravities and roared at his own body to do a thing it refused to do. There was a gold in it, in the legend, a gold the hair turned and the eyes turned and the whole sky seemed to turn, and there was a power in it that the old Saiyan stories swore could crack a planet like an egg. Super Saiyan, he said the words once carefully after a session, sitting on the chamber floor while Vegeta toweled the sweat from the back of his neck, and he watched the prince go very still. Where did you hear that? Vegeta said. Everywhere, nowhere, you say it in your sleep. Harry pulled his knees up. Kakarot has it, doesn't he? That's why he's stronger than you. That's the thing you're chasing in here at night when you think I'm asleep. For a long moment, Vegeta said nothing, and Harry thought he had pushed too far, as he sometimes did, testing the edges of what the two of them could say to each other. Then the prince sat down on the cold floor across from him, which he almost never did, and he looked at his own scarred hands. It is the oldest legend my people had, Vegeta said, a warrior who pushes past every limit, who burns so hot and so pure that the body itself changes to hold the fire. Gold hair, green eyes, power beyond anything the universe is built to contain. For 1,000 years it was a story we told to frighten and to dream, and almost no Saiyan ever reached it, and the royal line, my line, was supposed to be the one that did. His jaw worked. And then a low-class soldier's son, a clown raised in the dirt of this backwater planet, reached down into himself on a dying world and became the thing my whole bloodline failed to become. Kakarot. So yes, I chase it, every night. I will reach it or I will die in this chamber trying, because I am the prince of all Saiyans and I will not be second to him in the one thing that was meant to be mine. Harry was quiet. He understood better than most what it cost to want a thing that badly. Can I do it? He asked. Number, Vegeta said it flatly, and then, because the flatness landed hard on Harry's face, he went on, which was a kindness he rarely bothered with. You are not Saiyan, Harry. The transformation is written in our blood, in a thing your blood does not carry. That door is closed to you and it always will be, and I will not lie to you about it, because a warrior built on a lie falls the first time the truth pushes. He leaned forward. But I have watched you for 11 years, and I have felt the second fire in you do things Kai was never built to do, and I have started to believe that there is a door with your name on it that no one has ever walked through, because there has never been a you before. The Super Saiyan is a Saiyan past his limit. You are going to be something past every limit anyone has ever named. And when you find it, brat, it will not be gold. It will be whatever you are, turned all the way up. I'd stake my crown on it. Harry looked at the prince who had no kingdom left to rule and a crown he wore anyway, and he believed him, as he believed everything Vegeta told him in that voice, because Vegeta lied about a great many small things and never once about the large ones. Then we'd better keep training, Harry said. Yes, said Vegeta, getting to his feet, holding down a hand. We had. The near breaking came 2 days later, and it did not come from Vegeta. It came from Trunks. Trunks was 6, and he was a prodigy in the way that only the son of two of the most extraordinary people on the planet could be, and he idolized Harry with the fierce, uncomplicated worship of a small brother for a large one, and he had recently discovered something that no one had told him he should not say. He had discovered it the way children discover the worst possible thing to say, which is by accident, in the middle of losing. They were sparring in the yard, low gravity, half speed, the way Harry always sparred Trunks, holding himself down to a fraction of what he was so the smaller boy could learn. And Trunks, frustrated, outmatched, 6 years old and furious about it, had stopped in the middle of a flurry, stamped his foot, and shouted the thing. It's not fair, you're not even a real Saiyan. Dad only trains you because he feels sorry for you because your real parents didn't want you. The yard went quiet. It was not true. Trunks did not know it was not true. He was 6. And he had assembled the cruelty out of half-heard adult conversations and his own wounded pride, the way children build their worst weapons. But Harry, 11, standing in the suddenly enormous silence of the yard, felt the words go into him and find something he had not known was there, a soft, unguarded place under all the calluses, the one question he had never let himself ask in 11 years, not who his parents were, which Vegeta had told him, but whether they would have kept him, whether anyone would have if a prince had not happened to fall out of the sky. The second fire moved in him. He felt it come up his spine, hot and cold at once, wanting out, wanting to answer the hurt the way it had always wanted to answer hurt. And for one terrible instant, the air around Harry shimmered and the grass at his feet flattened in a ring and Trunks's eyes went wide with a fear that was suddenly real. And Harry held it. He held it as he had been trained to hold it in the worst moment, when everything in him was screaming. And he closed his fists and he closed his eyes and he stood in the flattened ring of grass and let nothing out that he had not chosen. And what he chose, after a long shaking moment, was to turn and walk away, up the slope into the trees, before he did something to a 6-year-old that he would carry for the rest of his life. He walked a long way into the woods, and then his legs stopped working, and he sat down hard against a pine and put his face in his bloody hands and did not cry, because warriors did not cry, a rule he had made up himself and was discovering, at 11, that he could not entirely keep. That was where Vegeta found him. The prince did not announce himself. He simply came up the slope and lowered himself onto the pine needles beside Harry with his back against the same tree, and for a long while he said nothing at all, which was its own language between them. The woods ticked and rustled. Far below, the lights of the compound came on one by one as the dark settled. "He's 6, Vegeta said finally. He didn't know what he was saying. "I know. You held the storm. With every reason to let it go, you held it. I watched the whole thing from the lab window." The prince's voice was even. "That was the hardest thing I have ever asked you to do, and you did it for a brother who had just tried to gut you and you walked away instead of winning. Most grown warriors I have known could not have done that. I am not certain I could have done it at your age." Harry didn't answer. He was looking at his hands. "Would they have kept me?" he said at last, so quietly the woods almost ate it. "My parents, if they'd lived, or did they?" He stopped. Vegeta was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, he did not reach for comfort, because he did not have it to give, and Harry would have known a lie the instant he heard it. He reached instead for the truth, which was the only currency the two of them had ever traded in. "I told you how I found you," he said. "I told you about your father dead at the bottom of the stairs, with his arm flung out toward the door he was trying to hold. I did not tell you everything about your mother." He looked out into the dark. "She was upstairs in front of your crib. She had not run. She had a clear path to the window and the night and her own life, and she did not take it, because taking it meant leaving you, and she would not leave you. The thing that killed her standing between it and you, with her arms out, making a wall of her own body. That is how she died, Harry. That is the last thing she ever chose to do." His jaw worked. "I have stood over a great many dead on a great many worlds. I have never, before or since, seen anything choose like that. So do not ask me whether they would have kept you. They kept you with the last strength in their bodies, against a thing that should have erased all three of you, and the only reason you are alive to doubt it is that your mother decided you would be." Harry was very still. The wind moved in the pines. Somewhere below, an engine of Bulma's hummed and cut out. "I dream about it sometimes," Harry said to the dark. "A green light, a woman's voice telling me to be safe. I always thought I made it up." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. "It's real, isn't it?" "That's her, that's the last thing she said. I don't know what she said. I wasn't there for that part." Vegeta's voice was rough and low and absolutely steady. "But I know what she did, and the doing says everything the words could. You came out of love so fierce it broke a law of the universe, and then you came to me, and I have spent 11 years making sure that what she bought with her life would never be cheap. You are not an orphan, Harry. You are the most expensive thing two worlds ever paid for, and you are going to live like you know it. You carry her in you," Vegeta said. "The second fire that came up to save Trunks today, the one you held when it wanted blood, that is hers. That is the thing she did, made into a power and put in your chest. Every time you protect something weaker than yourself instead of destroying something that hurt you, that is your mother, still choosing through you. Do you understand?" He turned and looked at Harry directly. "You were not unwanted. You were wanted so fiercely that the wanting broke a thing that breaks worlds. Don't ever let a child's cruelty make you forget it." For a long moment Harry didn't move. Then he scrubbed his face hard with the heel of one hand, and he got up off the pine needles, swaying, and he held out his hand to the prince, the way the prince had held out his 100 times. "On your feet," Harry said, his voice rough. "We've still got the evening session." Something crossed Vegeta's face that he did not bother, this once, to kill. He took the offered hand, and let the kid he would not call his son haul him up off the forest floor, and the two of them walked down the dark slope together toward the lit windows and the work that waited. Trunks was waiting for him at the bottom of the slope. The 6-year-old sat on the back step in the dark with his knees pulled up to his chin and his purple hair hanging in his eyes, and he had been crying, and he was trying with all the dignity of a small Saiyan Prince to pretend that he had not. When Harry came down out of the trees, Trunks scrambled up and then froze, suddenly uncertain whether he was allowed to. "You went in the woods," Trunks said in a wavering voice. "You went in the woods and you didn't come back for hours, and Mom said leave him be, and I thought—" His face crumpled and he forced it straight again. "I thought you weren't coming back. Because of what I said, I thought I broke it." Harry crossed the yard and crouched down in front of him, the way Goku had once crouched down in front of Harry, putting himself at the smaller boy's level. "You didn't break anything," Harry said. "It takes more than words to break me. Your dad's been trying for 11 years with his fists and he hasn't managed it. But I said," Trunks's lip trembled, "I said your real parents didn't want you, and that's not, I don't even know if that's, I just wanted to win, and then you got that look and the grass went flat and you walked away and the words ran out. I'm sorry, I'm really, really sorry." Harry was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down properly on the step beside his brother, shoulder to shoulder, and looked up at the same stars he had been counting his whole life. "Listen," he said, "two true things and then we don't talk about it again, all right? First true thing, you're right that I'm not a Saiyan, I'm not. I'm something else, something there isn't a word for yet, and I used to think that made me less, and it doesn't, it makes me me." He bumped his shoulder against the small purple-haired one. "Second true thing, my parents wanted me so much that my mother stood in front of a thing that kills worlds and would not move, and it cost her everything, and that's why I'm here. So nobody gets to tell me I wasn't wanted, not even me, especially not me." Trunks scrubbed his face with both fists. "Dad told you that, tonight, up in the woods." Harry looked at his brother. "He came and found me, same as he'd come and find you. That's the thing about your dad, Trunks. He'll never say a soft word in his life, but he'll climb a whole mountain in the dark to sit next to you when you're hurting, and that's worth more than soft words. You'll understand it when you're older." "I understand it now," Trunks said with enormous offended dignity, and Harry laughed. And after a moment Trunks laughed too, the easy bottomless laugh of a child whose world has just been put back together, and the two of them sat on the step in the dark, brothers who shared no blood and would have walked into fire for each other anyway, until Bulma called them in. The breakthrough came out of the near breaking, the way breakthroughs do. Harry could not have told anyone how he knew it was time. He only knew that something in him had shifted up there on the mountain. Some last wall between his two fires had thinned to nothing, and when he walked back into the chamber that night, he could feel them both at once in a way he never had before, the Kai and the storm, the fire he built and the fire that built itself, no longer two tenants in the same house but two halves of one thing, waiting for him to ask them to be whole. "Set it to 50, he told Vegeta, "and stand back." Vegeta looked at him for a moment, read whatever was in his face, and stood back. Harry walked to the center of the dome. He built his Kai as he had been taught, suffering it up out of his body, banking it in his fists until the air around them sang. And then, for the first time on purpose, at full strength, with his whole will behind it, he reached for the second fire and did not hold it back. It came up to meet the Kai like a tide coming up to meet a fire on a beach, and where they touched they did not cancel, they married. The white gold of the Kai and the storm blue of the magic ran together up Harry's arms and stood off his skin in a corona that was neither color and both, and the gravity in the chamber, the 50 obedient gravities, bent away from him in a bowl, the heavy air itself pushed back by the simple fact of what he had become. He raised his hands. He had no name for the thing he was about to do. He only meant it totally, the way the second fire required, and what he meant was, everything I am, at once where I choose. The blast left him in a column of fused light that punched up through the open hatch of the dome and into the night sky and kept going, a pillar of white-blue brilliance that the people in West City would talk about for a week, and the news would blame on the aurora, climbing until it thinned and scattered among the indifferent stars. The recoil should have flattened him. It didn't. The second fire held him up, braced him, because he had not only meant the blast, he had meant to survive it, and the fire that obeyed his meaning obeyed that too. Halfway across the compound, in the lit kitchen, Bulma looked up from her coffee as a column of white-blue light tore past the window and lit the whole mountain bright as noon for the space of 3 heartbeats. Beside her, Trunks dropped his spoon. The two of them ran to the back door and stood in it, staring up at the pillar of fused brilliance climbing into the night, and Trunks breathed with the total awe of a small brother for a large one. That's Harry. That's Harry doing that, and Bulma, who had built half the machines that made this family possible, and had never in her life seen anything like the thing now righting itself across the sky, found she had nothing at all to say. When it was over, Harry stood in the center of the chamber with smoke curling off his shoulders and his hair standing up and his eyes very bright, and he turned to find Vegeta staring at him with an expression the prince almost never wore, the bare unguarded face of a warrior who has just seen something genuinely new in a universe he thought he had already measured. "What was that?" Vegeta said softly. "Both of them," Harry said. He was shaking, drained, grinning. At the same time, on purpose. "I felt them go together and I meant it, and they went." He laughed a little wildly. Did you see how high it went?" "I saw." Vegeta crossed the floor slowly. He looked up at the hole the blast had punched in the night, and then back at Harry. "Listen to me carefully, because I am only going to say it once and I will deny it if you repeat it. In my whole life, across the whole of the galaxy, I have seen exactly 2 things that made me feel what I felt just now. The first was the legend of the Super Saiyan, the transformation my people whispered about and almost none of us ever reached." He paused. "The second was that, what you just did. You are not a Saiyan, Harry. You will never wear the gold hair or roar the way Kakarot roared on Namek. That door is closed to you, because it is written in a blood you don't carry. His eyes held Harry's. But you have just opened a different door, one that has never existed before, because there has never been anyone like you to open it. The Super Saiyan is the Saiyan past his limit. What you are going to become is something the universe has no word for yet, and I am going to be standing beside you when you find out what to call it. Harry looked up at the hole his power had punched in the night, and felt the drain of it pulling at him, the bottomless tiredness that came after, and under the tiredness a thing he had no word for either, a sense of having met himself at last and found the meeting good. It needs a name, he said. You always say a technique without a name is a technique you don't really own. Vegeta considered this with the seriousness he gave only to the things that mattered. What did it feel like? Like both fires deciding to be one thing, like the storm and the Kai finally agreeing to stop arguing. Harry searched for it, like a tide and a flame at the same time, and neither one putting the other out. Then it will name itself when it's ready, and not before. A name you grab too early is a name that never fits. Vegeta took him by the arm and pulled him upright and held him there, while his legs remembered how to be legs. For tonight it's enough that you did it, once, badly. It nearly emptied you, you can't aim it, and the recoil would have snapped a lesser spine in half, and there are 1,000 mornings of work between this and a weapon you can trust. His hand stayed on Harry's shoulder a beat longer than the lesson strictly required, but you opened the door. With your own 2 hands, you opened a door the universe never built. Remember how tonight felt. There is only ever one first time, and a warrior who forgets his is a warrior who stops climbing. Vegeta showed his pride as he showed everything that mattered, which was by doing and not saying. Harry's training gi had taken the worst of the fused blast, the back of it scorched through and the seams gone at both shoulders, and Harry expected it to go in the bin and a new one to appear, because that was how things worked in a house with a capsule corporation attached. But the next morning he found the prince at the kitchen table in the gray dawn with the ruined gi spread in front of him and a needle in his scarred fingers, sewing. Harry stopped in the doorway and watched. Vegeta did not look up. "Sit down and eat," the prince said. "You're at 1,100 calories before noon or the body eats itself. Don't watch me, it's unsettling. You can sew. I can do anything a campaign requires. A soldier who can't mend his own kit in the field is a soldier who fights cold and wet and loses." Vegeta drew the thread through, neat and tight, restitching a shoulder seam with the same precision he brought to everything. "This gi has been through what you've been through. It earned its repair. We don't throw out a thing that's served, brat. We mend it and we send it back in." He bit the thread. "Besides, the next one Bulma orders will be cut for the size you were last year. You've grown again. Nothing in this house fits you anymore." Harry sat down and ate the mountain of food that had appeared at his place, and he watched the Prince of all Saiyans mend a child's torn training clothes in the dawn light with the care of a man performing a rite, and he understood, as he understood all the things Vegeta never said, exactly what was being said. "Thank you," Harry said, around a mouthful, because saying it plainly was the only way to make it land. Vegeta grunted, which meant you're welcome, and held the mended gi up to the window light to check the seams, and there was, for just a moment, before he smoothed it off his face, something on the hard scarred features that any stranger would have called what it was. Bulma came in then, hair in a knot, already talking about the readings the chamber had logged overnight, and stopped when she saw the Prince of all Saiyans bent over a child's torn gi with a needle in his hand. She did not say anything about it. She had learned, over the years, which of his tendernesses could survive being seen and which could not, and this was one of the fragile ones. She poured herself coffee, and set a second cup down by his elbow without comment, and went to her readings, and the only sign that anything unusual had happened was that Vegeta drank the coffee, which he never did when anyone was watching him be grateful for it. The owl came on the last night of June, and it changed everything, though none of them knew it yet. Harry saw it first. He was on the roof where he still went when the chamber was too small for his thoughts, lying on his back in the warm dark counting the same indifferent stars he had counted his whole life, when a shadow crossed the moon and resolved, impossibly, into a bird. A tawny owl, broad-winged and silent, and it was not hunting. It was searching. It quartered the air over the compound in a slow, deliberate grid, and in its talons, against every law of nature Harry knew, it carried a square of cream-colored paper. He sat up. The owl found him. It dropped out of the dark and landed on the ridge of the roof an arm's length away, folded its wings, and regarded him with round amber eyes that held an intelligence no owl had any business holding. Harry, who could feel the energy of every living thing on the mountain, felt this one, and it tasted wrong or not wrong, but other, the same flavor as his own second fire, the storm smell, the thing from the country across the world. The bird was made of the same stuff he was. It extended one leg. Tied to it, he saw now, was the square of paper, and on the paper in green ink in a looping old-fashioned hand was writing, Mr. H. Potter, The Roof, Capsule Corporation, West City. Harry's hands were steady as he untied it, because Vegeta had spent 11 years teaching him to keep his hands steady, but something moved through him as he read his own name, his true name, the name from the blanket with the stag, written by a hand a world away that should not have known he existed. Potter. He had never had a second name. He had been Harry, only Harry, for as long as he could remember. The paper was not paper. It was heavier, older, and when he unfolded it, the same green ink marched across it in the same looping hand, and Harry read it twice in the moonlight while the owl watched. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. We have been searching for you for a very long time. Please be assured that you are safe, that you were always loved, and that there are those in this world who have never stopped looking. Term begins on the 1st of September. We await your owl by no later than the 31st of July. Yours sincerely, and with more hope than this short letter can hold, Albus Dumbledore, Headmaster, Witchcraft. Wizardry. Harry turned the words over and found, to his own surprise, that they did not sound strange at all. They sounded like a name finally pinned to a thing he had carried his whole life. The second fire. The storm, the mending of broken teapots and the catching of falling brothers and the seeing around trees. Not a Saiyan power and not a power Vegeta had any name for, because it had a name, it had always had a name, and the name was waiting for him in a country full of green hedges on the far side of the world. He pressed his hand flat to the letter, and the second fire stirred in him the way it stirred for nothing else, leaning toward the paper, recognizing its own. Below on the dark mountain, he felt his teacher's energy come awake, sharp and sudden, as Vegeta sensed the thing that had landed on his roof. Harry stood up with the letter in his hand and the owl watching him and the stars wheeling overhead, and he knew with the certainty that had been bred into him that the broken thing across the world had finally remembered he was alive. For 11 years he had been one thing made by one man on one mountain, a warrior, a student. The keeper of accounts scratched under a cracked tile. Now a bird had dropped a second name onto his roof, and a second world along with it, a world that had made him before Vegeta ever had, a world where his mother had lived and chosen and died, a world that had a word for the storm in his chest, and a school to teach it, and an old man who signed his letters with hope. He did not know yet what he wanted. He only knew that the two halves of him had a chance now, to become one thing the way his two fires had, and that whatever was broken and waiting across the sea would have to be met sooner or later, and that he would rather meet it on his own 2 feet than be hidden from it like a child. Vegeta had not raised him to be hidden. Vegeta had raised him to be the thing other people hid from. Vegeta, he called down into the dark, his voice carrying flat and clear the way Vegeta had taught him to make it carry. You'd better come up here. It started. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The owl and the Prince. Vegeta read the letter 4 times, standing on the roof in the dark with the owl watching him, and then he held it out to one side and incinerated it with a thread of kai so fine it left no ash, only a smell of burnt cream. Vegeta, Harry lunged, too late. That was mine. You memorized it. I watched you do it. The prince was looking at the owl, which had not flinched at the destruction of its cargo, and was regarding him with round amber eyes that held altogether too much understanding for a bird. Witchcraft, wizardry, a school. He said the words the way other men said vermin. 11 years I keep you off every grid on this planet, no records, no name, nothing for anyone to find, and a bird walks through all of it and lands on my roof with your true name written on its leg. That is not a school, brat. That is a hunter that found its quarry. The only question is whether it means to eat you or recruit you, and in my experience those are usually the same thing. It said I was loved. It said they never stopped looking. Everything that wants to own you tells you it loves you first. But something moved behind the prince's eyes as he said it, because he had told Harry a version of that sentence himself once in a kitchen at 4 in the morning, and they both knew it. He turned from the owl. Downstairs. We're not deciding this on a roof in the middle of the night, and your mother in the lab will want her say, and she'll be insufferable if we leave her out. Bulma had her say. She had a great many of them. She sat at the kitchen table with the dawn coming up gray in the windows and a mug going cold in her hands, and laid it out as she laid out an engineering problem, in clean hard pieces. 1. The bird found us, which means anyone with that bird's methods can find us, which means the secret we've kept for 11 years is already over, and pretending otherwise is how people get killed. She held up a second finger. 2. Harry has a power that nobody in this house, including the genius and the prince, fully understands, and there is apparently an entire civilization out there that has a word for it and a school that teaches it, and a kid does not get to be the strongest version of himself by refusing the only education on Earth that fits him. 3. She looked at Vegeta. These people knew his parents. They have his history. They are the only door he will ever have to the people who made him and the night that made him an orphan. You of all people don't get to slam that door, Vegeta. You spent 11 years making sure he'd never have to wonder if he was wanted. Don't make him wonder where he came from instead. Vegeta said nothing, which from Vegeta was a kind of agreement. And 4, Bulma said more gently to Harry, "It's your name on the letter, not ours. Whatever we think, you're the one who decides. So, what do you want?" Harry had been quiet through all of it, turning his cold breakfast over with a fork, the memorized words of the letter running behind his eyes. "We have been searching for you for a very long time. You were always loved." "I want to know," he said finally, "everything. Who they were, what happened, what the thing was that came for me, and why a school across the world has been looking for me my whole life like I'm something that got lost. I'm not afraid of it." He looked up and his eyes were lilies, green and steady. "Vegeta, you raised me not to be hidden. You raised me to be the thing people hide from, so I'm not going to hide from this. I want them to come here, and I want them to look me in the eye, and I want them to tell me the truth in front of you, where you can hear if they lie." For a long moment the prince looked at the kid he had carried out of a ruin. Then the corner of his mouth moved, the thing that was not quite a smile and meant more than one. Spoken like a warrior, he said, "Fine, let them come, send the bird back with your terms, and brat." He stood. "When they walk through that door, you let me do the part where we find out how strong they are. That part is mine." The first of them arrived 3 days later, and she did not knock. Harry was running drills in the yard at dawn when the air beside the old well folded sideways, the way light folds over hot tarmac, and a tall, severe woman in dark green robes simply stepped out of the fold, as though she had walked through a door no one else could see. She wore square spectacles and a pointed hat, and an expression of someone who had braced herself for a great many possibilities and was discovering that none of them had been adequate. She took in the compound. She took in the white dome of the gravity chamber, the scorch marks climbing the mountain behind it, the shattered training drones stacked by the shed. And she took in the lean, dark-haired boy who had stopped his drill and turned to face her, unhurried, unsurprised, dropping into a stance so smooth and so total that Minerva McGonagall, who had taught children for 40 years, felt the hair rise on her arms. "Mr. Potter," she said, "my name is Professor Minerva McGonagall. I am Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts School. I knew your mother and your father." Her voice did not quite stay level on the last word. "I have wanted to meet you for a very long time." "I know who you are," Harry said. "Your letter came, you're early." I said the 29th. "Yes, well," she drew herself up. "Forgive an old woman her impatience. We have been looking for you for 10 years, Mr. Potter, and the discovery that you have been alive and well on the other side of the world, this entire time has been a great deal to absorb, and I confess I could not wait the extra 2 days. Her eyes went again to the scorched mountain. "Though I begin to suspect that well may not be the word. Child, what is this place? What have they done with you here?" "Trained me," Harry said with simple pride. The air changed. McGonagall felt it before she understood it, a pressure on the back of her neck, the unmistakable sense of being measured by something that had measured a great many things and found most of them wanting. She turned and Vegeta was there, standing at the corner of the residence where a heartbeat ago there had been no one, arms folded, the dawn behind him. "You came out of the air," the prince said, "without a ship, without a technique I recognize. Show me how you did that. I beg your pardon." "You heard me?" He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "You stepped out of a fold in the world onto my ground, uninvited, to take something of mine. Before we have a civil conversation, which I am going to know what you can do, because I do not negotiate with powers I haven't measured. Show me, or I'll find out the hard way, and the hard way is harder on you." Minerva McGonagall had faced down Death Eaters. She had stood in the front rank of a war. She looked at the compact, scarred, terrible figure in front of her, and her instincts, honed across a long and dangerous life, told her with perfect clarity that she was in more danger at this moment than she had been in years, and that the danger had nothing to do with magic. So she showed him. She drew her wand and, with a flick that was almost contemptuous, transfigured the shattered drone beside the shed into a living, snorting boar, and then into a marble statue of a boar, and then back into a drone, and then she lifted the well's iron bucket into the air, set it spinning, and turned it into a hovering disk of fire that she snuffed with a word. It was a casual display, the kind a master gives to impress a child, and it would have impressed a child. Vegeta watched it with the flat attention of a man pricing goods. Transformation, he said. Telekinesis, conjured fire. All of it shaped by that stick and those words, which means the stick and the words are a crutch, which means without them you are considerably less. He unfolded his arms. It's the same power that's in him, the second fire. But where his runs wild and free and answers to what he means, yours is fenced into rituals and rooted through a tool, which is why a child of mine who has never held a stick in his life is already stronger than you, and why you should be very glad I'm the reasonable one in this family. Vegeta, Bulma called from the doorway in the warning tone of long practice. Be nice. I am being nice. She's still standing. McGonagall lowered her wand. She was not a woman easily wrong-footed, and she made herself take the measure of the situation properly, as she would have taken the measure of a duel. The compound, the machines, the scorched mountain. The lean, dangerous child who had not once in all of this looked frightened of anything, least of all the alien who plainly terrified the rest of the world. And the woman in the doorway with the blue hair and the coffee, watching all of it with the weary affection of someone who had long ago accepted that her household was impossible. You have raised him to be rude, McGonagall said to Vegeta, recovering her footing on the firm ground of disapproval. I have raised him to be alive, said Vegeta. Manners are what the weak use to survive the strong. He has never needed them. Manners, McGonagall returned crisply, are what the strong use so that the weak need not fear them. But I would not expect you to know the difference. And to her own surprise, the prince inclined his head a fraction, as though she had scored a point worth scoring. It was Bulma who got them all inside and sitting down, who put tea in the formidable professor's hands and steered the conversation onto solid rails. And it was during that first wary hour, while Trunks peered around the doorframe at the witch with enormous eyes, and Harry sat on the floor in his place against the wall, that Minerva McGonagall found herself softening despite every intention, because the child kept asking about his mother, not about himself. Not about the famous scar or the war or the prophecy that the whole of Britain whispered. About Lily, what she had been like, what she had laughed at, whether she had been kind. She was the kindest person I ever taught, McGonagall said at last, and her voice, which had not wavered facing down dark wizards, wavered now. And the bravest, and she would be very angry with all of you, I think, for what you have put this child through. And then she would look at him, at how he carries it, and she would forgive you everything. She set down her tea. I begin to see that he has not been raised badly, only strangely. I shall tell the headmaster so. Albus Dumbledore arrived that afternoon, and he knocked. He came up the mountain road on foot, an absurd figure in robes of deep blue against the pines, long silver beard and a traveler's staff, and he stopped at the boundary of the property and waited there in the open, hands visible, until someone came out to him. It was a courtesy, and Vegeta, who had expected another fold in the air and another presumption, registered the courtesy and adjusted his estimate of the old wizard upward by a degree. They received him in the front room, over the cracked tile. Bulma made tea, which Dumbledore accepted with grave thanks. Vegeta did not sit. He stood against the wall, with his arms folded where he could see the door and the windows and the old wizard all at once, an old soldier's habit, and Harry sat on the floor with his back to the prince's legs, as he had sat for lessons his whole life, and the old headmaster looked at the two of them, the alien and the child, and something moved across his ancient face that was equal parts wonder and grief. You have his mother's eyes, Dumbledore said to Harry. I have wondered for 10 years whether I would ever see them again. I had almost stopped letting myself hope. Tell me about them, Harry said. My parents, from the beginning. And tell me what came for us that night, and tell me the truth, all of it, because he tilted his head back against Vegeta's shins, because he'll know if you don't, and you don't want him to think you lied to me. Dumbledore's gaze flicked to the prince and back. No, he agreed softly. I rather think I don't. And he told it. He told it well, the way of a man who had carried the story a long time and shaped it smooth in the carrying. James Potter, brave and reckless and loyal to a fault. Lily Evans, brilliant and fierce and kind, the best student of her year, who had loved the world enough to fight for it. Your father could not pass a rule without bending it, Dumbledore said, and a little of the grief lifted from him as he said it, the way it does when an old man is allowed, briefly, to remember the living instead of the dead. He was a terror in his school days, your father, brilliant and arrogant and brave, and he loved your mother for years before she would so much as speak civilly to him, because she saw the arrogance and would not have it, and she made him better simply by refusing to be impressed. And he became better. That is the truest thing I can tell you about James Potter. He loved a woman who demanded he be worthy of her, and he spent his short life becoming worthy, and in the end he died holding a staircase so that she and you might have one more minute. Your mother kept a flower garden that she enchanted to bloom in midwinter, because she could not stand a season without color. She defended the defenseless before she could properly hold a wand. When she laughed, Harry, the whole room turned toward it, the way plants turned toward a window. He looked at Harry, who had his mother's eyes. You have her laugh. I heard it in the yard before I came in. I would have known it anywhere. Harry sat very still and held the picture of them, the only one he had been given in 11 years, and pressed it carefully into the place inside him where he kept the things that mattered, next to a stag-embroidered blanket and a count scratched under a cracked tile. A war and a dark wizard at the head of it, a creature who had unmade his own humanity in pursuit of power and immortality and called himself Lord Voldemort. A prophecy, half-heard, that named a child who might undo him. And a night in a village called Godric's Hollow, on the last day of October, when Voldemort came to the Potter's cottage to murder a 1-year-old in his crib and end the prophecy before it could grow teeth. He killed your father first, Dumbledore said, and his voice was very gentle. James died holding the stairs to buy his family time, and then Voldemort went up to the nursery where your mother stood between him and your crib. He gave her the chance to step aside. She had done nothing to him. He had no wish to waste a killing. He told her to move. The old wizard's eyes were wet. She would not move. She begged for your life and she would not move, and so he killed her where she stood, and then he turned his wand on you. And it didn't work, Harry said quietly. And it did not work. Dumbledore set down his tea. The killing curse, Harry, cannot be blocked. There is no counter, no shield, no charm in all our long history that has ever turned it. It had never failed. It struck you, a child of 1 year, and it rebounded, and it destroyed the most dangerous dark wizard of the age and left you with nothing but a scar. He looked at the lightning mark on Harry's forehead. We never fully understood why. I have a theory which I have never been able to test, and which I believe more than ever now that I have seen you, your mother's choice. She died to protect you when she could have lived freely, knowingly, with love. That kind of sacrifice leaves a mark of its own, an old and deep magic, a protection written into your very skin. When the curse came for you, it broke against the thing your mother had made of her own death. Love, Harry, the oldest magic there is. It is the only thing that has ever beaten him. The front room was silent. Harry did not move. Behind him, Vegeta had gone very still against the wall, and when he spoke, his voice had changed, gone low and flat, and carrying the cold that Bulma had heard exactly twice in 11 years. Say the rest, Vegeta said. You're stepping around it, the thing that did this. It isn't dead, Dumbledore met his eyes. No, the headmaster said. It is not. Voldemort did not die that night. He had taken steps, terrible steps, to anchor himself to life beyond the death of his body. When the curse rebounded, his body was destroyed, but the thing that he had made of himself survived, broken, formless, less than a ghost. For 10 years he has been little more than a rumor and a shadow, hiding, waiting, gathering the strength to return. But he is patient, and he is clever, and he is not gone. He folded his hands, and he will not have forgotten the child who unmade him. When he returns, and he will return, the first thing he will want in all the world is Harry Potter, dead. That is the truth, all of it, as you asked. I am sorry it is so heavy. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Vegeta pushed off the wall. He crossed the room slowly, and he crouched down in front of the old wizard so that they were eye to eye, and Bulma, who knew every register of him, set down the teapot very carefully because she did not know which way this was going to go. Let me tell you what I heard, Vegeta said, conversational, almost pleasant, which was the most dangerous he ever sounded. I heard that a coward came to a house in the dark and murdered 2 young people, and then tried to murder their baby in its bed, because a half-heard rumor frightened him. I heard that the strongest dark wizard of your age was so afraid of a 1-year-old that he came in person to make sure of the kill. And I heard that he is not dead, that he is out there, broken and hiding and growing his strength back, and that one day he intends to come and finish what he started. He tilted his head. Did I hear all of that correctly, Headmaster? You did, Dumbledore said steadily. Good, Vegeta stood. Then understand something, and carry it back to whatever council of frightened old men sent you here. I found that child in that ruin 11 years ago, a half-minute after your kind missed him. I have spent every day since making him into something your world has never seen. He has stood in gravity that would crush your strongest wizard to paste. He has thrown a beam of his own fused power into the sky high enough to be seen from the next country. He is 11 years old, and he is already, in the only currency that has ever mattered, stronger than anyone in this room including me, and I am the prince of all Saiyans. His eyes were black and cold and utterly certain. When your Dark Lord comes back for his revenge, he is not going to find the helpless baby he left in that crib. He is going to find a warrior I built specifically to break him. And he is going to find me standing behind that warrior, so you can stop being sorry, old man. The heavy thing you came here to set on this child's shoulders, I took off them 11 years ago. He's been carrying something far harder ever since, and he's never once buckled." Dumbledore looked up at the prince for a long moment, and then slowly he smiled, and it was a smile with a great weight of years and sorrow behind it, and underneath, something that might have been the first real hope he had felt in a decade. "You know," the headmaster said, "in 10 years of fearing what had become of Harry Potter, of imagining every cruelty that might have befallen a lost and orphaned child, it never once occurred to me to fear that he might have fallen into the hands of someone who loved him too fiercely to let him be weak." He inclined his head. "I find I am not sorry at all. Whatever you are, sir, and whatever this is, I think Lily would have approved of you." She had a great respect for people who refused to let those they loved be made small. Something passed over Vegeta's face and was gone. "Don't," he said, "tell me what his mother would have thought. You didn't know her well enough to spend her like that, and neither did I, and that's exactly why he's going to go to your school and find out for himself." It was Harry who broke the silence that followed. "I'm going," he said. He climbed to his feet, and he looked from the old wizard to the prince and back, and there was no question in his voice, only the calm of a decision already made. "To Hogwarts, in September. I want to learn the second fire properly, the part of me Vegeta can't teach because it isn't his, the part that's my mother's. I want to walk the halls she walked and meet the people who remember her. I want to understand what I am." He looked at Dumbledore. "But I'm going on my own terms, and they're not negotiable, so write them down." "I am listening," said Dumbledore with great courtesy. "1. I keep training. Every morning, every break, every chance I get. I don't stop being what Vegeta made me to become what you'll make me. I'm going to be both, or I'm not going at all." Harry counted it on his fingers the way Bulma did. 2. I'm not a savior, and I'm not a symbol, and I'm not a weapon you get to point. If your world has been lighting candles for some baby it lost, that baby's gone. There's just me. If anyone tries to use me, I'll leave, and I'll be very hard to find, and your bird won't manage it twice. "Reasonable," Dumbledore murmured. "And the third," Harry glanced back over his shoulder at Vegeta, and for the space of a breath the warrior fell away and there was just a kid about to leave home for the first time, 11 years old, asking permission without asking it. 3, Harry said. "He gets to come check on me, whenever he wants, however he wants. And the first person at that school who tries to stop him, or tries to keep me from him, finds out what a gravity chamber does to a human body." He turned back to Dumbledore. "He's my family. That part isn't up for discussion. Not now, not ever." Dumbledore rose and bowed, a real bow, to the child and then deliberately to the prince. "Mr. Potter," he said, "I accept all 3 of your terms gladly, and I will see them honored on my life. Hogwarts would be fortunate beyond measure to have you, on any terms you cared to name." He turned to Vegeta. "And you, sir, will always be welcome at my school, though I suspect the welcome is somewhat beside the point where you are concerned." "It is," Vegeta agreed. They left the wizards with arrangements made and a date set, McGonagall sweeping back into her fold in the air and Dumbledore walking down the mountain road as he had come, and the compound was quiet again, and Harry stood in the yard in the late light and looked at the white dome and the scorched mountain and the only home he had ever known. Vegeta came and stood beside him. For a while neither of them said anything. "You're worried," Harry said. "You do the thing with your jaw when you're worried." "I do not have a thing with my jaw. You've had a thing with your jaw since the old man said the word Voldemort." Harry looked up at him. "You think I'm not ready?" Vegeta's eyes stayed on the mountain. "I think you're more ready than any creature your age has ever been, and I think I am sending you across the world into a nest of people who do not understand you, to learn a power that nearly killed you in your crib, with a broken monster somewhere out there waiting to remember your name. Both of those things are true at once. That's what worry is, brat. It's knowing your soldier is good and knowing the field is bad, and not being able to fight on it for him." His jaw worked, the thing he did not have. "I have spent 11 years making sure nothing could put you down. Now I have to watch you walk somewhere I can't always follow and trust that the work held. I have never in my life been good at trusting that the work held." Harry was quiet for a moment. "It held," he said. "You held. You want to know how I know?" He held up his hand and let the second fire come into it, slow and controlled, a sphere of storm blue light steady as a held breath, the thing he could do now without shaking, without draining, the thing that had been a guttering candle when he was 4. 11 years ago this almost killed me. Now it does what I mean. That's not the school's work. That's yours. Wherever I go I take that with me. I take you with me. You don't have to be on the field, Vegeta. You already built the soldier. The soldier doesn't forget who made him." The light winked out. The prince looked at the kid he would not call his son, and for once he did not reach to kill the thing on his face, and the thing on his face in the last of the light was unmistakable, and neither of them said a word about it, because some things you guard best by letting them be seen exactly once. "On your feet at dawn," Vegeta said at last, roughly, turning toward the house. "If you're going to leave stronger than you are tonight. We have a summer. We are not going to waste it." "No," Harry said, falling into step at his side, 2 strides for every one as he had walked beside this man his whole life, even now that the strides had nearly evened out. "We're not." Harry saw the wizarding world for the first time on a bright morning at the end of August, and he was not impressed, which delighted him, because he had been a little afraid that he would be. They went to a place called Diagon Alley. The 3 of them, Harry and Bulma and Vegeta, reached through the back of a grubby London pub by tapping a pattern of bricks that folded open the way McGonagall had folded the air. Beyond the bricks lay a crooked cobbled street under a sky full of owls, lined with shops that sold cauldrons and broomsticks and barrels of bat spleen, crowded with people in robes who turned, every one of them, to stare at the small procession that had just stepped through, because 2 of the 3 did not belong and the third had a lightning scar on his forehead. The staring started as wonder and curdled fast into something else when the whispers got going. "That's him. That's Potter. Harry Potter here after all these years." And under it, lower, the part the whisperers did not mean him to hear. "Who are they? An alien. Is that an alien? Where has he been? Who's been keeping the boy who lived?" Harry walked through it with his head up and his hands loose, the carriage Vegeta had drilled into him before he could speak, the carriage of someone who has decided that a crowd is not a thing to fear, and he found that the staring slid off him like rain off old leather. He had been raised by a being who could end the street with a gesture, and had instead taught a frightened orphan to be gentle. A few hundred people pointing at his scar held no power over him at all. Vegeta liked none of it. He walked at Harry's shoulder with his arms folded and his eyes moving, cataloging exits and threats out of ancient habit, and he made his opinion of the wizarding world known in a low-running commentary that Bulma kept trying to shush. "They sell sticks," he said. "An entire street, and half of it sells the sticks they can't function without. A people who keep their power in a tool are a people you can disarm. Remember that, brat. You're going to get us thrown out. They can try." At Gringotts, the marble bank run by sharp-eyed goblins, Harry learned that his parents had not sent him into the world empty-handed. A cart ride down into the cold deep earth brought them to a vault that had waited 11 years for him, and when the goblins swung the great door open, gold spilled out of the lamplight, more money than Harry had ever seen, a small fortune that James and Lily Potter had set aside against a future they had not lived to share. Harry looked at it and felt very little, because gold had never meant anything to a child raised to measure wealth in mastered gravity. But at the back of the vault, on a shelf, sat a flat box, and the box meant everything. Inside it was a photograph. It moved the way the photographs on the staircase in the ruin had moved, and Harry stood in the cold of the vault and looked at it for a long time. A dark-haired young man with glasses and an unrepentant grin, his arm around a red-haired young woman whose green eyes were Harry's own, and between them, held up to the camera, laughing, fat-fisted, a baby with a full head of black hair and no scar yet on his forehead. The 3 of them waved up out of the little frame, again and again, frozen in a single, ordinary happy moment that someone had thought to save. His father pulled a face. His mother laughed and turned the baby toward the light. The baby reached for something off the edge of the picture and would not be still. Harry had been alive for 11 years and had never once seen their faces. "That's them," he said. His voice did not sound like his own. "That's me." Bulma pressed her knuckles to her mouth and made a sound that was mostly breath. Vegeta said nothing. He looked over Harry's shoulder at the 3 waving strangers in the frame, at the red-haired woman whose dead arms he had found curved around an empty cradle, and something crossed his hard face that he did not trouble to hide in the dark of the vault where only his family could see it. "Keep it close," the prince said at last, low. "A warrior should know the faces he fights for. Those 2 bought your life. You carry them with you now, where they can see how it was spent." Harry closed the box and held it against his chest the whole way up out of the earth, and he did not let go of it for the rest of the day. The wand was the only part that stopped Harry. They went into a narrow, dim shop full of dust and thousands of slender boxes, and a pale-eyed old man named Ollivander came out of the shadows and looked at Harry the way the owl had looked at him, seeing too much, and he had Harry try wand after wand, each one wrong, until at last he grew very thoughtful and went into the deepest part of his shelves and came back with a box he handled like something holy. 11 inches, Ollivander murmured, holly, and a core of phoenix feather. An unusual combination and a curious history, which I think we shall not discuss today. He held it out. Go on, Mr. Potter. I have a feeling about this one. Harry took the wand and the second fire came up to meet it. He had not called it. It came on its own, the way it had come for a falling brother and a falling teapot. Recognizing something, leaning toward the wand in his hand, and warm storm-blue light ran up his arm and stood off his skin and filled the dusty shop with a glow that made Ollivander gasp and Bulma's breath go quiet, and even Vegeta uncross his arms. The wand had not chosen Harry. The wand had been claimed, the way the prince had claimed a baby in a ruin, the way Harry claimed everything that became his completely. Curious, Ollivander whispered when the light had faded. Very curious indeed. I remember every wand I have ever sold, Mr. Potter. The phoenix whose tail feather lives in your wand gave one other feather. Only one. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. The shop went very still. Then I'll break its brother, Harry said simply. The same way I broke it the first time, except this time I'll remember doing it. And he paid the old man and walked out into the sunlight with his mother's power singing in a holly wand in his fist. And behind him, Vegeta looked at the place where Ollivander stood and almost smiled. They sent him off on the 1st of September from a railway platform that a person reached by walking through a brick pillar, which Vegeta declared was the most sensible thing he had seen in the entire wizarding world, because a hidden door was at least a defensible position. The scarlet engine breathed steam over a platform packed with families, trunks, owls in cages, weeping parents and bored older students and small first-years clinging to their mothers' sleeves. And in the middle of it stood the strangest send-off the platform had ever hosted. A blue-haired woman straightening a collar that did not need straightening, a small purple-haired boy trying very hard not to cry and failing, and a scarred figure in a Capsule Corporation jacket who radiated, even here, even among wizards, the unmistakable air of something that the universe stepped around. Right, Bulma said, and hugged him fiercely, and pretended the hug was about his collar. Real letters, not just I'm fine, and eat. They will not feed you enough. No one feeds you enough. I'll send food. You'd better come back at Christmas, Trunks said ferociously into Harry's jacket. You'd better. Who am I supposed to spar? Nobody here can take a hit like you. You'll be twice as strong come Christmas, so long as you do the drills I left you, Harry said, crouching down to his brother's level. Every morning, count your falls, make the last number yours. I'll know if you slacked off, I'll feel it the second I see you. He gripped the small shoulder. Guard the house while I'm gone. That's your post now. I'm trusting you with it. Trunks straightened, suddenly a soldier given a command, and scrubbed his face and nodded. And then there was only Vegeta. The prince looked at the 11-year-old he had carried out of a ruin, who stood now on a wizard's platform with a trunk and a wand and a school waiting at the end of a long, bright train, going somewhere the prince could not entirely follow, and for a moment neither of them said anything, because the not saying had always been their truest language. You remember everything, Vegeta said at last. It was not a question. Every morning, the falls and the risings, you let nothing out that you didn't choose. When they tell you that you can't, you find out for yourself, and when something stronger than you puts you down, I get up. Harry's voice was steady. Always on my feet, I remember. You remember? Vegeta put his scarred hand on the top of the black head, once, as he had since the kid could stand, and left it there a beat longer than he ever had before. Then go and find out what you are, and when you found it, come home and show me, and we'll make it stronger. His hand dropped, and brat. If anything in that castle frightens you that you cannot beat, anything at all, you send word, and I will be there before the fear has finished arriving, and I will introduce it to a gravity it has never imagined. There is nowhere on this world or any other that is far enough to keep me from you. Do you understand? Harry's eyes were bright. He did not trust his voice, so he did the thing instead, the thing that said it best. He snapped to attention, fist over his heart, the salute of a soldier to his prince, the only one he had ever served. Vegeta returned it. Then the whistle blew, and Harry hauled his trunk onto the scarlet train, and leaned out the window as it pulled away. And the last thing he saw of his family was a blue-haired woman waving, a purple-haired boy running alongside the platform's edge until it ran out, and a scarred prince standing perfectly still in the steam, arms folded, watching his soldier go to war until the train rounded the bend and the mountain that had made him was finally, for the first time in 11 years, out of sight. And the sun went down behind the mountain that had made him, and somewhere across the world an old wizard walked a country road with hope in his chest for the first time in 10 years, and somewhere farther still, in a forest no one visited, a broken thing without a body felt, for reasons it could not name, the first cold stirring of something it had almost forgotten how to feel, which was fear. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Two bloodlines, the sorting hat sat on Harry's head for 4 full minutes, which was, the older students agreed, the longest anyone could remember, and inside the brim, a small voice argued with itself about what to do with him. Well now, the hat murmured, in a tone of genuine professional difficulty. This is a first. I have sorted children for 1,000 years, and I have never once met a mind like this. Courage, oh, courage in great heaps, the reckless kind and the cold kind both, the kind that runs toward the danger and the kind that simply refuses to run from it. That's pure Gryffindor, that is. But underneath it, cunning, real cunning, a strategist's mind, a mind that reads a battlefield before it moves. And loyalty fierce enough to break worlds, and a hunger to be tested that would have made Rowan a Ravenclaw weep with envy. The hat paused, and under all of it, child, 2 fires, 2. I have never sorted a wizard who was also something else. What did they make of you, out there beyond the edge of everything we know? A warrior, Harry thought back at it with total certainty. Yes, the hat said slowly. Yes, that's exactly it, isn't it? Not a student. A warrior who has come here to learn one more weapon. Well, there is only one house for a heart like that, the house of those who run toward the fire. It raised its voice to fill the great hall. Gryffindor. The table on the left erupted, and Harry walked to it under the floating candles and the enchanted ceiling full of stars, and he sat down among strangers who would become, over the coming year, the second family of his life, and he did not yet know it, and neither did they. What they knew that first night was that Harry Potter was not what the stories had promised. The boy who lived had been, in the imagination of wizarding Britain, a tragic figure, a lost lamb, a fragile orphan who had survived a great evil and would surely need protecting. The reality of him sat at the Gryffindor table eating with the appetite of 3 grown men, calm and watchful and entirely unafraid of the 400 people staring at his scar. And when Percy Weasley asked him, kindly, whether he was nervous about his first day of classes, Harry looked at him with the blank puzzlement of a person hearing a foreign language and said, nervous of school, and went back to his 4th helping. He had come up to the castle in a boat across the black water in the dark, one of a flotilla of tiny first-years ferried under a sky thick with stars, and the castle had risen out of the night ahead of them, a mountain of lit windows and impossible towers, and the other children had gasped, and Harry had not, because he had been raised on a mountain of lit windows by a being who fell from the stars, and grandeur had never frightened him. He had only looked up at the floating candles and the enchanted ceiling that showed the true sky, and thought that his mother had eaten beneath this ceiling once, and his father, and that he was the first of his blood to come home to it in 11 years, and the thought had sat warm and strange in his chest all through the feast. He rose before dawn the next morning, and every morning after, because some things you do not put down simply because you have changed continents. The other first-years woke, those first weeks, to an empty bed and a window full of gray light, and the distant sight of Harry Potter running the long shore of the Black Lake at a speed that made the prefects rub their eyes, or hanging in a handstand on the astronomy tower's parapet with his feet against the dawn, or driving punches and kicks into the cold air in patterns none of them recognized, 10,000 of them, until the sweat steamed off him in the autumn chill. He had no gravity chamber here. So he made the castle his chamber. He ran its moving staircases against their motion. He climbed its towers on the outside. He found in the disused dungeons a stone chamber where no one went, and there each night he built his kai and held it and shaped it, keeping the discipline a prince had carved into him, refusing to let a single morning be wasted. Ron Weasley found out about the training in the 2nd week, when he woke at dawn to use the bathroom and saw Harry doing one-armed press-ups on the cold dormitory floor with his trunk balanced across his shoulders, and counted, and lost count somewhere past 300. Blimey, Ron said from the doorway, gangly and red-haired and entirely awake now. What are you doing? 3:26, Harry said, not stopping. 3:27. It's 5 in the morning. I know, I'm late. I usually start at 4. Harry set the trunk down, rolled to his feet, and looked at the freckled boy in the doorway, who was the first person his own age who had ever spoken to him as though he were ordinary, which Harry found he liked enormously. My father trained me, every day since I could stand. If I stopped because I came to school, then the school made me weaker, and I didn't come here to get weaker. He picked up the trunk again. You can join me if you want. I'll go easy. Ron, to his eternal credit, joined him. He lasted 11 minutes, lying flat on the floor afterward, wheezing about how the twins had never made him do anything this mad, and a friendship was forged in the way the strongest ones always are, in shared suffering freely chosen. Hermione Granger was harder, because Hermione did not suffer fools and had decided on the train that a boy who had been raised by aliens and could barely spell was probably a fool. She revised the opinion in charms. On the morning Professor Flitwick set them to levitating Feathers and Harry, who had levitated his baby brother out of the air over a 40-foot drop at 7 years old, looked at the feather, found the exercise insulting to the thing in his chest, and lifted not only his own feather but every feather in the room, and the inkwells and the desks, and Professor Flitwick, who hung near the ceiling beaming and applauding while the entire class clutched their seats. "You're not supposed to do that," Hermione said afterward, hurrying to catch him in the corridor, scandalized and fascinated in equal measure. "You didn't even say the incantation." "You have to say the incantation. It's Wingardium Leviosa. The whole point is the wand movement and the words. How did you? I don't need the words." Harry slowed to let her keep up. "The words are a crutch. They're how you tell your magic what you mean when you can't mean it clearly on your own. I was taught to mean things clearly, so I just mean it, and it happens." He looked at her, at the bushy hair and the enormous frustrated intelligence behind her eyes. "But you knew the incantation before anyone in the class, didn't you? First one to get the feather up. I watched." Hermione, who was braced for mockery and unaccustomed to being noticed for the right reasons, went pink. "Well, yes. I'd read ahead, then teach me the words," Harry said. "All of them, the proper way, the way the books say. I can mean things, but I don't know your world and you do, and a warrior who refuses to learn from someone who knows more than he does is just a fool with muscles." He stuck out his hand, the soldier's habit. "I'm Harry. I think you're the cleverest person I've met since my mum, who built spaceships, so that's high praise. Help me not embarrass myself, and I'll teach you to throw a punch that'll put Malfoy through a wall. Deal." Hermione Granger looked at the offered hand, and at the strange fierce boy attached to it, and made a decision that would, in time, help save the world. "Deal," she said. Draco Malfoy was the rival, because every story needs one, and because Draco had made the mistake of deciding that a Potter raised in obscurity by no proper wizarding family was beneath him, and had said so loudly with his two large friends behind him in the entrance hall on the second week of term. "They're saying you were raised by muggles," Draco sneered. "Worse than muggles, some freak in the mountains who isn't even human. No name, no family, no breeding. And they call you the boy who lived." He looked Harry up and down. "You're nothing, Potter. You're a stray someone dressed up." The entrance hall went quiet, the way crowds do when they sense blood coming. Harry did not get angry. He had been called worse, by a 6-year-old who meant it, and he had learned in the woods that day exactly what to do with the part of him that wanted to answer cruelty with force. He looked at Draco Malfoy with the calm, measuring attention his teacher turned on everything, and the calm was somehow worse than any shouting. "The freak in the mountains," Harry said, conversationally, "is the prince of a warrior people, and he found me in the ruins of my parents' house the night something murdered them, and he raised me to be strong so that no one could ever do to me what was done to them. He's the best man I know. So you can say what you like about me, Malfoy. I genuinely don't care. You're not the first child to try, and you won't be the last." He took one step closer, and Crabbe and Goyle, the two large friends, found themselves stepping back without deciding to. "But you said freak about my father. And where I come from, we settle that on a training floor at a time you choose in front of whoever you want to watch. Any morning. Dawn. I'll even let you keep your stick." He smiled, and it was Vegeta's smile, the one that was not a smile at all. "Bring your friends, bring all of them, it won't matter." Draco Malfoy did not take him up on it, then or ever, and the entrance hall remembered, and the legend of Harry Potter began quietly to reshape itself, away from the lost lamb, and toward something the school did not quite have a word for, which was correct, because the word was being invented in a stone chamber in the dungeons every night at 4 in the morning. He met a broom for the first time on a cold Thursday, and he was not impressed by that either. Madam Hooch lined the first-years up on the grounds beside a row of battered school brooms and told them to put out a hand and say up, and most of the brooms rolled over or twitched or did nothing at all, and Harry's leapt into his palm before the word was fully out of his mouth, because it could feel what he was, the same as the wand had, the same as the owl. When Hooch blew her whistle and the class rose into the air in a wobbling, nervous line, Harry rose with them, and then kept rising, and then forgot the broom entirely, because his body knew the air better than any stick ever could. He had flown under his own power since he was 9. He left the broom hanging in space and simply flew, looped the towers, hung upside down over the lake to watch his own reflection, and came down laughing to find the entire class and a white-faced Madam Hooch staring up at him. "Mr. Potter," Hooch managed, "brooms do not, that is, you cannot simply without a—" "Sorry," Harry said, "not sorry at all," retrieving the abandoned broom out of the air with a flick of the second fire. "I forget it's strange here. My father can fly. I grew up doing it. I'll stay on the broom, I promise." He did not stay on the broom. Within a week, the Gryffindor Quidditch captain had begged McGonagall for a special dispensation, the rules be hanged, because a seeker who could fly without a broom and chose to use one anyway out of politeness was the kind of advantage that won a house the cup. And the legend of Harry Potter grew another inch, and somewhere in the staff room, a stammering professor in a purple turban listened to the talk of the flying boy and said nothing, and smiled a smile no one could see. Harry first tasted the wrong thing in defense against the dark arts. The classroom reeked of garlic, which Professor Quirrell claimed was to ward off a vampire he had met in the Black Forest, and he stammered through his lessons so badly that half the class had stopped listening by October. Harry listened, but not to the words. He had walked into that classroom on the first day and felt it, faint and cold under the garlic and the stammer, a thread of energy so wrong it turned his stomach, the storm smell that lived in his own scar gone rotten and old, and his scar had woken for the very first time and burned like a brand pressed to his forehead. He had said nothing then. He had only watched the trembling professor with the flat hunting attention his father had drilled into him, and noted that the wrongness was strongest when Quirrell turned his back, strongest of all from the professor's purple turban, where something seemed to hide beneath the cloth and look out from the back of a stolen skull. He noted it, and he held the second fire still behind his ribs, and he did not let the recognition show on his face, because a hunter who shows the prey he has seen it is a hunter who eats the prey's escape for dinner. "You all right, mate?" Ron whispered that first day, watching Harry rub his scar. "You've gone funny." "Garlic," Harry murmured. "Strong stuff." And he set the wrongness in the cold, quiet place his father had built in him for exactly this, the place where you put a threat you have found but are not yet ready to fight. And he waited, and he trained, and every week the wrong thing under the turban grew a little less faint, a little more sure of itself, a little closer to whatever it was reaching for in the heart of the castle. The troll came on Halloween, and it was the first time Hogwarts saw what Harry Potter actually was. It came in through the dungeons during the feast, 12 feet of mountain troll, gray and reeking and stupid with rage, and in the chaos of the evacuation Hermione had been forgotten in a bathroom on the second floor, crying over Ron's careless cruelty earlier in the day, and so she was alone when the troll, drawn by the sound of weeping, shouldered through the door and raised a club the size of a man. Harry felt it before he heard the screaming. He felt her terror flare across his senses as he had felt every living thing flare since he was 4, the inner ear that heard the heat of life, and he was moving before the staff at the head table had finished rising, out of the great hall, against the flow of the crowd, faster than any 11-year-old wizard had any business moving, because he had not run flat out as a wizard. He had run as what his father made him. He hit the bathroom door at a speed that took it off its hinges. The troll had Hermione backed into a corner, the club already swinging down, and there was no time for words, no time for a wand, no time for anything but the thing Harry had trained for his entire life, the worst moment when everything is screaming and you do exactly what you choose. He chose to put himself between the club and the girl. He came in under the swing and he caught the descending club on his crossed forearms, 12 feet of troll and a ton of stone bearing down, and the floor cracked under his feet, and he held it. He held it. Hermione pressed into the corner, looked up through her tears, and saw an 11-year-old boy holding back a mountain troll's killing blow on his bare arms, his heels driven into the stone, the cold blue light of something that was not quite magic standing off his skin, and she stopped crying, because the world had just rearranged itself into a shape that had no room left for fear. "Hermione," Harry said, perfectly calm, holding a ton of stone over both their heads. "Close your eyes. This is going to be loud." He shoved the club up and away, stepped inside the troll's reach, and drove a single rising punch into the thing's sternum, with the second fire braided through his fist exactly as he had once put it through a prince's guard. The troll left the ground. It crossed the bathroom backward through the air, and hit the far wall hard enough to crack the stone and slid down it and did not get up, and Harry stood in the wreckage breathing slow and even, as he had been taught to breathe at the end of a fight, and turned to find Hermione Granger staring at him, with her whole understanding of the universe visibly reassembling behind her eyes. That was how the professors found them, a downed troll, a destroyed bathroom, and Harry Potter standing guard over a classmate, unhurt, unbothered, asking Hermione whether she was all right in the gentle voice he used for Trunks. McGonagall went white. Snape's lip curled in something that was almost respect. And Dumbledore, arriving last, looked at the troll embedded in the wall and at the child who had embedded it there and said only, very quietly, "Mr. Potter, perhaps you would walk with me a moment," and there was a weight in his voice that had nothing to do with house points. "You felt her," Dumbledore said when they were alone in his circular office, the portraits of old headmasters pretending to sleep. Before anyone else knew, you felt her fear from across the castle. "I feel everything alive," Harry said. He was looking at a perch by the window where a great scarlet and gold bird sat watching him, a bird that tasted to his senses of the same warm storm fire that lived in his own chest. Every person in this castle, right now, like lights on a map. I've been able to since I was small. Vegeta trained it into me. It's how I hunt. He looked back at the headmaster. Her light went wrong, so I went. Remarkable. Dumbledore studied him over his half-moon spectacles. Harry, what you did tonight, holding back a troll's blow with your arms, throwing it through a wall, that is not magic as we understand it. No wizard your age could do it. Few wizards of any age could do it. What is it? It's both, Harry said. It's what I am. The kind my father taught me, the fire I build, and the magic my mother gave me, the fire that builds itself. I learned to use them together. That's the part nobody here can teach me, because nobody here has both. He paused, and then he said the thing he had come into the office half meaning to say, because he had decided years ago on a mountain that he would not be hidden from anything. There's a wrong energy in this castle, headmaster. I've been feeling it for weeks. Dumbledore went very still. Tell me. It's faint and it hides and it moves around, but it's there. It tastes like. Harry stopped, and for once something moved in his calm, a thing from very far back, from before he could speak. It tastes like the thing in my nursery. The storm smell, but spoiled, gone cold and rotten, the same flavor turned wrong. I've smelled it my whole life in my own scar, in the worst dreams, and now I'm smelling it here in the waking world, walking the halls of your school. He met the old man's eyes. It's him, isn't it? The thing that killed my parents. It's here. It's already here. The silence in the office was total. The portraits had stopped pretending to sleep. I had hoped, Dumbledore said at last heavily, to have more time before you asked me that question. But you were never going to be a child who waited to be told, were you? He sank into the chair behind his desk and suddenly looked every one of his many years. Yes, Harry. I believe Lord Voldemort, or what remains of him, has found his way into this castle. He is weak, weaker than he has been in a decade, barely more than a wool riding in a borrowed body. He is here because there is a thing hidden in these walls that could restore him to power and to flesh, and he means to take it. I have known he was near. I did not know you could feel him so precisely. That changes a great deal. Then let me find him, Harry said. I can track him. You said yourself no one feels him the way I do. Let me hunt him before he gets strong enough to. Dumbledore's voice was gentle and absolute. Not yet. You are 11 years old, Harry, and however extraordinary you are, he is the most dangerous wizard who has ever lived, and a wounded animal is most dangerous of all when it is cornered. I will not send a child to corner him. He held up a hand against Harry's protest. I will set my own protections on the thing he wants. I will watch. And you will write to your father tonight, and you will tell him everything you have told me, because I suspect there is no force on this earth I would rather have informed of this development than the being who raised you. But you will not hunt, Harry. Not yet. Give me that, in exchange for the truth I have just given you. Harry looked at him for a long moment, and then, because it was a fair trade and he had been raised to honor fair trades, he nodded once. Not yet, he agreed. But when it's time, headmaster, you send for me. Not in spite of my age, because of what I am, that's the deal. That, said Dumbledore with the ghost of a smile, is precisely the deal your father made me at your kitchen table. You are very alike, you two, in the ways that matter most. He looked at the child with the lightning scar and the steady green eyes, and for a moment the hope and the dread in him were perfectly balanced. Write your letter, and Harry, thank you, for Miss Granger and for your honesty. Both are rarer than you know. Vegeta came 2 days later, and he did not write back, and he did not knock, and the whole school remembered it for years. He arrived at dawn, dropping out of a clear sky onto the lawn before the front doors with a crack that rattled the windows of 4 towers, and by the time the staff had assembled in alarm, he was already walking up the steps as though he owned them. Arms folded, eyes moving, in his capsule corporation jacket among the gargoyles in the grandeur, and the students pressed to the windows and whispered that the alien had come, the one who had raised Potter, and they were not wrong to be afraid. He found Harry on the training shore before anyone could stop him, and the two of them stood together by the gray lake in the cold morning, the prince and his student, and Harry showed him on the wind the place in the castle where the wrong energy hid. Vegeta tasted it. Harry watched his teacher's face change, watched 11 years of careful hardness shift into something colder and older, the face the prince had worn over a young man dead at the foot of a staircase. That's it, Vegeta said softly. That's the thing from the ruin. I would know it anywhere. I have spent 11 years waiting to feel it again. His hand closed slowly into a fist. It's weak now, pathetic. A ghost in a stolen coat. I could walk in there and put my hand through it and end this whole story before your breakfast. Then why don't you? Harry said, though he already half knew the answer. Because it isn't mine to end. Vegeta looked at him, and there was something in it that Harry had rarely seen, the prince setting aside his own pride deliberately, which cost him more than any blow. I have wanted to kill this thing for 11 years, brat. I have dreamed about it, and it is not my kill. It came for you in your crib. It murdered your mother and your father. It put that mark on your head. The debt is yours, and a warrior does not steal another warrior's debt, not even to spare him, not even when the warrior is the only thing he. The prince stopped. His jaw worked. When the time comes, you will be the one to end it, not because you must, because it is yours, and because by then you will be ready, and because I did not raise you for 11 years to step in front of you at the last. He put his hand on the black head. But I will be there. The old man was right to fear me. When it stops being a ghost and becomes a thing that can be fought, you send word, and I will stand at your back. And between the two of us, brat, there is nothing in this world or any other that we cannot break. Harry leaned just slightly into the rough hand, as he had since he was small, and the gray lake lapped at the shore, and far above them a castle full of children watched an alien prince and a marked boy stand together against a thing none of them could yet see coming. It's getting stronger, Harry said. A little every week. Whatever it's after in there, it's close to getting it. Then you train harder, Vegeta said, every morning. You let nothing out you don't choose, and you forget nothing I taught you, and when the day comes you meet it on your feet. He turned to go, then stopped, and added, gruff and low, the thing he had crossed the world to say in person rather than write, because some things should not be trusted to a bird. The house is too quiet. Trunks does your drills every morning and counts his falls out loud so the empty rooms will have something in them. Your mother sets a place for you at dinner and pretends she forgot. Come home at the solstice and stop them being fools about it. His scowl deepened to cover the rest. And eat more. You've gotten thin. They're starving you here. And then he was gone, straight up into the clear sky and away. And Harry stood on the shore with the warmth of the rough hand still on his head, and the taste of home in his chest, and the taste of the wrong thing in the castle behind him. And he understood that the long childhood was ending, and that the thing it had all been preparing him for was finally, slowly, beginning to wake. The weeks after Halloween welded the three of them into one thing, the way a hard fight always welds the people who survive it together. Ron and Hermione had stood in a wrecked bathroom and watched Harry hold a troll's club on his bare arms, and a friendship built on a thing like that does not come apart easily. They became, the three of them, inseparable, and they each gave the others what they lacked. Hermione gave Harry the words, the proper incantations and wand movements and the long, patient theory behind them, and was delighted to discover that her bottomless reading was, to a boy who could already do the magic, the single most valuable thing in the world. Harry gave them both the thing his father had given him, by degrees. He had Ron and Hermione on the training shore at dawn, gently, scaling everything down, teaching them to breathe, to fall and rise, to find the calm at the center of fear. Ron would never be a warrior, and they all knew it, but he stopped flinching, and he learned to stand his ground, and one gray morning he held a plank position for 2 whole minutes while Harry counted and Hermione cheered, and the look on his freckled face was worth more than any spell. My brothers always said I was the soft one, Ron admitted, lying flat on the cold sand afterward, wheezing happily. Charlie works with dragons, Bill breaks curses, the twins are, well, the twins. I figured I'd just be the one who held people's coats. He squinted up at Harry. Nobody ever thought I could do anything before. Then they're idiots, Harry said, hauling him up by the arm as he had been hauled up 10,000 times. On your feet, you've got one more set in you. I can see it even if you can't. That's the whole job of a teacher, Ron, seeing the set you don't believe is there. But it was Hermione who cracked the mystery, because of course it was. It had started with a forbidden corridor, and a thing the whole school whispered about, the third-floor passage that Dumbledore had forbidden on pain of a very painful death. And Harry, who could feel the wrong energy pooling thickest exactly there, had told the other two everything, the wrongness, the turban, the thing from his nursery, all of it, because he had decided long ago that he would not be a person who carried his battles alone when he had brothers and sisters to carry them with. Together they investigated. They got past the great 3-headed dog that guarded the corridor once by accident, and Harry, who had stood unafraid before a prince who could end planets, had looked at 3 sets of slavering jaws and simply not been impressed, which had bought them the half-second they needed to retreat. They wormed the rest out of Hagrid, the vast, gentle gamekeeper, who let slip a name over tea, Nicholas Flamel, and could not be made to say more. Hermione found Flamel in a book she had checked out for light reading, which was the kind of thing Hermione did. The Philosopher's Stone, she breathed, in the library, jabbing the page. Nicholas Flamel made it. It turns metal into gold, and it produces the elixir of life. It makes the drinker immortal. He's over 600 years old. and the stone's not in a vault at Gringotts anymore. There was a break-in this summer. The day we were there, someone tried to steal something from a vault that had already been emptied that very morning. She looked up at them, her clever face pale. Dumbledore moved it. Here, that's what's down the third-floor corridor. That's what the dog is guarding. That's what the wrong thing in Quirrell wants. The three of them sat in the lamplight of the library and understood, all at once, the shape of the whole year. It wants to be immortal, Harry said slowly. It wants flesh again, and then it wants to never die. The thing that murdered my parents wants to live forever. Something settled in him, cold and clear, the calm before a fight. I'm not going to let it, not the immortal part, and not the flesh part, and not the part where it comes back to finish what it started. 11 years it's been broken and hiding. It picked the wrong year to get strong, and it picked the wrong castle because I'm in it. Harry's Hermione said carefully, Dumbledore told you to wait. He did, and I gave him my word, and I'll keep it, right up until the moment the thing makes its move for the stone. Then all bets are off, because a thing that has the elixir of life is a thing nobody can kill, and I'm not letting it get that far. He looked at his two friends, the first he had ever had who were not made of his own family's blood. When it moves, I'm going down there. You don't have to come, this isn't your debt. Don't be stupid, said Ron with enormous dignity. We held a coat once, we're not going back to it. And Hermione, who had Dumbledore's instructions and her own good sense both telling her to refuse, looked at the friend who had caught a troll's club for her and put them aside and said, We're coming. Obviously. Someone has to remember the incantations while you punch things. It woke the night the wrong energy spiked, in the last week before the solstice holidays, and Harry felt it from his bed like a struck bell. He woke the other two without a word, the way the three of them had planned, and they dressed in the dark and moved down through the sleeping castle, Harry at the point with the holly wand in one hand and the second fire banked behind his ribs, Hermione with every defensive charm she knew loaded and ready, Ron pale and frightened, and there anyway, which Harry thought was the bravest of the three. The wrongness had pooled thick and sudden and triumphant on the third floor, because the thing in the borrowed coat had finally stopped waiting and had gone to take its prize. The corridor's forbidden door stood blasted open. Beyond it, the great three-headed dog lay slumped and snoring beside a harp that played itself, and a trapdoor gaped in the floor, and down through it, one after another, lay the ruins of Dumbledore's protections, each torn through by something that had grown, in a single night, far stronger than a ghost. A wall of strangling plants, already burned aside, a storm of flying keys, a chessboard the size of a room. Harry and his friends went through them faster than the enchantments had been built to allow, because Hermione knew the theory and Harry simply refused to be slowed, breaking what could be broken and outflying what could not, until they came to a low arch the wrongness poured through like cold smoke. Wait here, Harry told the other two, and for once they did not argue because they had felt the temperature of his voice. If I don't come back up, you run, and you find Dumbledore, and you tell my father everything. Promise me, Harry, Hermione started. Promise me. They promised, and Harry walked alone into the last chamber, the way it had to be because the debt was his. It was cold and round and lit with green fire, and a tall mirror stood at its center, humming with old magic, and before the mirror stood the thing from his nursery wearing the face of a stammering professor, the stammer gone now, the cloth torn away from the back of his skull. It turned, and the second face turned with it, the flat, red-eyed serpent face of the broken creature that had murdered Harry's family, looking out at him across 11 years of hatred and sudden, dawning recognition. Harry Potter, the cold voice said, in two mouths at once, the infant who would not die, how you have grown. How strong you have become, and how convenient, for I find I cannot pull the stone from this mirror, and you, I think, are exactly the sort of arrogant child who could. Fetch it for me, and perhaps I will let your friends above live. Harry raised his wand and let the second fire come up to meet it, and the chamber filled with a light that was neither magic nor Kai but both, the light of two bloodlines married into one, and he looked at the thing that had taken everything from him and found, at last, the calm at the center of every fight his father had ever taught him to find. Get off my parents' grave, Harry said. We're settling this, on my feet, right now. Quirrell came at him and the cold voice shrieked, seize him, and Harry let the body close, because he had been taught that you let the enemy commit, and when the possessed professor laid hands on him to take him by the throat, the thing his mother had written into his skin 11 years ago woke and answered. Where the professor's fingers touched Harry, they blistered and blackened and smoked, searing like hands closed on a heated brand, and Quirrell reeled back screaming, and Harry pressed in, because a warrior does not waste an opening. He drove a single fused strike into the professor's chest. Kai and Storm braided together exactly as he had once put it through a prince's guard, gentled at the last instant to break a possession and not a man, and the borrowed body came apart from the dark thing riding it and crumpled to the cold floor, the host released, dying, free, and the wraith tore loose. It rose out of the ruin of Quirrell in a howling cloud of wrongness, a face of smoke and malice, the naked spirit of the creature that had killed James and Lily Potter, too diffuse for any fist to find, and it hung in the green light and looked at the child it had failed to murder in his crib, and for the space of a breath the two of them simply regarded each other, the orphan and the thing that had made him one. "You cannot kill me," the wraith hissed. "I am already less than death. I cannot be ended by a child, however clever, however strong. But you, Harry Potter, you can be remembered, and I have a long memory." It gathered itself, and where it had meant to flee in terror, it now fled in something colder, a promise. "I will have a body again, flesh and blood and power your little tricks cannot touch. And when I am whole, I will not come to a castle full of old men who protect you. I will come for everything you love, one piece at a time, until there is nothing left of you but the wanting to have died in that crib. Grow as strong as you like, child. It will only make the breaking sweeter." It rushed him then, straight at him, through him, and the cold of it passing over his scar drove Harry to his knees, with a pain he had felt only in dreams. And then it was gone, up and out through the stone, out into the night and the world, broken and bodiless and free, leaving a boy on his knees in the green light over the ashes of its host, the stone still safe in its mirror, the first round over. That was where Dumbledore found him, arriving too late by a hair, the way the old wizard had arrived too late once before, 11 years ago, to another room where this same thing had escaped him. He took in the scene in a glance, the freed and dying host, the safe stone, the child on his knees, and his ancient face filled with a grief and a pride that warred and could not settle. "He's coming back," Harry said, before the headmaster could speak. He got to his feet swaying, because some things you do not stay down for, not ever. "Not a ghost next time. He told me, a body, flesh and blood and power. He's going to find a way back into the world, and then he's going to come for everyone I love." He looked at Dumbledore, and his green eyes were his mother's, and they did not waver. "So we stop pretending I'm a schoolboy you have to protect. I'm going to write to my father tonight, and I'm going to tell him it started, and the two of us are going to spend every day, until that thing has a body again, getting ready to take it apart the day it does." He wiped the ash from his hands. "You wanted more time before I asked you the hard questions, headmaster. Time's up." He just ended it. Albus Dumbledore looked at the 11-year-old standing over the wreck of Lord Voldemort's latest defeat, and understood with a clarity that was equal parts relief and sorrow, that the prophecy he had feared for a decade had not chosen a lamb after all. It had chosen a weapon, forged across the stars by the only being alive stubborn enough to make one out of love. "Yes, Harry," the headmaster said quietly, "I rather think it has." And far away on a mountain across the world, a prince of a dead people woke in the dark with the taste of the wrong thing suddenly sharp in his senses from half a planet away, and rose, and went out to the gravity chamber, and turned the dial higher than he had ever dared, because his soldier had just met the enemy and lived, and the war they had spent 11 years preparing for had finally, truly begun. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The Return of the Dark Lord. 4 years can do a great deal to a child, and they had done all of it to Harry Potter. He was 15 now, and there was nothing left of the lost lamb the wizarding world had spent a decade mourning. He had grown tall and lean and dangerous, his black hair as wild as ever, the lightning scar pale and old on a forehead that had stopped aching years ago. He had spent 4 years living in 2 worlds at once and refusing to be lessened by either. At Hogwarts he was a legend. The professors had given up trying to grade against any normal scale. He had mastered the wand magic Hermione drilled into him, and then gone past it into territory the textbooks did not chart, fusing every spell with the second fire until his magic did things that made even Dumbledore go quiet and thoughtful. And every morning, every holiday, every stolen hour, he trained the way his father had taught him, because the promise made over a dead woman's body in a ruin had never once loosened its hold on either of them. The thing that had fled the castle in a howl of smoke had not been idle either. Harry felt it sometimes, on the edge of his senses, the cold wrong taste of it moving across the world, gathering, growing, drawing the scattered remnants of its old army back to its banner, one frightened wizard at a time. He had told Vegeta. He had told Dumbledore. And the 3 of them had spent 4 years getting ready, because all of them knew, with the certainty of people who do not lie to themselves, that the wraith meant to come back, and that when it did, it would not come back the same. The 4 years had not been quiet ones. Harry had gone back to Hogwarts each September and come home to the mountain each summer, and he had grown into both lives until the seam between them stopped showing. Ron and Hermione had grown with him, the three of them inseparable still, Hermione the finest young witch of her age, and Ron a steady hand in a crisis who had long since stopped flinching. And the two of them had stood beside Harry through a school career that the professors discussed in the staff room in tones usually reserved for natural disasters. He had won the House Cup and the Quidditch Cup and a dueling tournament that he had entered, at McGonagall's insistence, with a wand and not his fists, and won anyway, which had frightened people more than if he had cheated. Dumbledore had quietly reassembled the old order of fighters that had stood against Voldemort in the First War, the Order of the Phoenix, and had quietly made sure that its members understood there was a 15-year-old in the world who was worth more in a fight than all of them together, and a scarred alien behind him who was worth more than that. The wizarding world, which had spent a decade mourning its lost savior, did not quite know what to do with the savior it had gotten back. A polite, dangerous, unimpressed young man who treated their entire civilization as one more thing he was willing to learn from and absolutely unwilling to be ruled by. They loved him and feared him in roughly equal measure, and Harry, who had been raised by a being the whole galaxy feared, found the combination familiar and easy to carry. Through all of it the cold thing gathered in the dark, and through all of it Harry trained, and the two facts ran toward each other across 4 years like trains on a single track. The morning it finally happened, Harry was home on the mountain, and he and Vegeta were sparring in the gravity chamber at 400 times the gravity of Earth. It was a number that would have been unthinkable 4 years ago, a number that would have flattened the child who first staggered across the floor at 2G into paste, and now the two of them traded blows in it almost lazily, a prince and his student, evenly enough matched that neither could end it quickly, which was the whole reason they did it. Harry had stopped being something Vegeta trained. He had become something Vegeta tested himself against, and there was, in that, a pride the prince had never once spoken and never once needed to, because Harry could read it in every blow his father threw at full strength without holding anything back, the highest compliment a warrior could pay. "Your left drops when you're tired," Vegeta said, between exchanges, both of them streaming sweat in the heavy air. "It's dropped 3 times in the last minute. Fix it or I'll make you pay for it. You've been saying that for 10 years, and you keep doing it, so I keep saying it." Vegeta caught Harry's next strike and turned it, and they broke apart, circling, breathing. "When you can go an hour without dropping that guard, you'll be ready for the day this stops being practice, not before." And that was when Harry felt it. He went still in the middle of the heavy air, his head coming up, his senses reaching past the walls of the chamber and the mountain and the curve of the world, because something had just happened on the far side of the planet, something he had felt only once before, in fragments, in his worst dreams. The cold, wrong taste of the thing from his nursery, but vast now, swelling, climbing, drinking power up out of the earth and out of other living things, and out of something old and terrible, rising and rising until it stood in his senses like a black sun. "You feel it," Vegeta said. It was not a question. The prince had gone very still too. "It's him." Harry's voice was quiet and certain. "He's doing it right now, the body. He's pulling power from everywhere, more than a wizard should be able to hold, more than anything I've ever felt from him." He turned to his father, and there was no fear in it, only the cold clarity of a soldier who has heard the first gun of a war he has trained his whole life to fight. "It's started. The thing we've been getting ready for. It's happening tonight." Vegeta walked to the console and shut off the gravity, and the world came back to its honest weight around them, and the Prince of all Saiyans looked at the 15-year-old he had carried out of a ruin and built into a warrior across 14 years, and his face was the face he had worn over a dead young man at the bottom of a staircase long ago. "Then we go," Vegeta said, "together, the way I promised you on a railway platform. You take the front because the debt is yours, and I take your back because you are mine." He gripped Harry's shoulder hard, as he would grip a comrade's. "On your feet, brat, we have a monster to meet." Bulma was already in the doorway of the chamber, white-faced, a communicator in her hand, because she had built the sensors that ringed the compound and they had all gone off at once. "Dumbledore's patroness came through 30 seconds ago," she said, "the orders mobilizing. Half of magical Britain just felt whatever you two felt. He says it's a churchyard on a moor in the north. He's sending everyone he has, and he says," her voice caught and steadied, because she was Bulma Briefs and she did not come apart, not where her family could see. "He says, please, for the love of everything, do not let Harry face it alone. He won't be alone." Vegeta was already pulling on a fresh chest plate over the rents in his suit. He has never once been alone. That was the entire point. He looked at her, and something passed between the two of them that had been 17 years in the making, the prince and the woman who had let an alien keep an orphan in her house and never once made him say thank you. Keep Trunks here, lock the compound. If this goes badly, you take the children and you run, and you do not look back, and you do not come for us. Promise me. I promise nothing of the kind and you know it, Bulma said. So go and come back, both of you, or I will build something that can reach the afterlife and drag you home by your ears. Vegeta almost smiled. Then he and Harry were gone, two streaks of light tearing north across the dark curve of the world, the prince and his student flying side by side toward the worst thing either of them had ever faced. And below them, the lights of the only home Harry had ever known fell away behind, and ahead the storm gathered black over a moor where a monster was being born. They found it in a ruined churchyard on a windswept moor, because of course it was a graveyard, because the thing had a taste for dead places and old bones. Harry and Vegeta came down out of the night sky together onto the edge of the moor, and what they found stopped even the prince for half a breath. A great ring of black-robed figures stood among the leaning headstones, dozens of them, Death Eaters drawn back to their master's call, and at the center of the ring a fire burned in a vast iron cauldron, green and wrong, and the air above the moor was thick with stolen power, ley lines torn open and bleeding light, the life drained from 100 captured magical creatures caged at the churchyard's edge, all of it pouring down into the cauldron and into the thing rising out of it. Harry had felt the ritual building from across the world, but feeling it and standing in it were different things. The whole moor had been turned into an engine for making a god out of a ghost. The headstones had been carved with marks that hurt to look at. The torn ley lines ran through the wet grass like rivers of bleeding light, and at the cages along the churchyard, while the captured creatures, unicorns and phoenixes and things with no names, were being emptied of their lives one by one, their power drawn out in long bright threads and braided down into the cauldron's green fire. And bound to the Dark Lord's reforming body, hung about his pale throat on a chain of black iron, was a relic, an old and terrible thing that Harry's senses recoiled from, a shard of something that drank power the way the second fire drank Harry's wanting, a vessel built to hold more strength than any living wizard had ever been meant to wield. Voldemort had not simply come back. He had made himself a battery for the murder of the world, and he had wired it to a heart that had never in its long, cruel existence felt one moment of mercy. It rose tall and pale and terrible, a body knitted from steam and bone and stolen magic, a face that had once been a man and was now a flat white serpent's mask with slit red eyes, and as Harry watched, the last of the stolen power poured into it and the thing threw back its head and breathed, and the breath came out of it as a shockwave that flattened the grass for 100 meters and rang against Harry's senses like a struck bell. This was no wraith. This was no ghost in a stolen coat. Lord Voldemort had spent 4 years and the lives of 100 creatures and the torn open veins of the earth itself making sure that when he came back, he would come back as something that could stand against the one weapon in all the world that had ever frightened him. He had come back to fight a warrior, so he had made himself into one. Harry Potter, Voldemort said, and his red eyes found the two figures at the edge of the moor, and his lipless mouth curved. You came, I rather hoped you would. I have spent 4 years preparing a welcome. He spread his pale arms, and the stolen power crackled off his skin in arcs of sick green light, a corona of it, a thing Harry had never seen a wizard wear. Do you feel it, boy? I have learned the shape of your power. The fire of the body, you call it, the strength your alien beast taught you. For 4 years I have torn it out of the earth and out of lesser things and bound it into myself, until I am no longer merely the greatest wizard who ever lived. I am that, and I am your equal in the only language you respect. I made myself into the thing you are, so that I could take from you the one advantage you have ever had. The red eyes burned. Tonight there is nothing you can do that I cannot answer. Tonight the child who would not die finally learns how. You talk a lot, Harry said, for a thing that ran from an 11-year-old. And he moved. The first exchange tore the graveyard apart. Harry came in faster than the eye could follow, fused power standing off his skin in a corona of white gold and storm blue, and he struck the thing that had murdered his parents with a blow that would have ended a mountain, and Voldemort caught it. Caught it on one pale hand, the green corona flaring against the white gold, and the shockwave of the meeting blew the ring of Death Eaters off their feet and shattered every headstone for 50 meters and dug a crater into the moor beneath them. Harry felt the impact travel up his arm, felt the wrongness of it because nothing made of magic should have been able to stand against that strike, and this thing had not only stood, it had smiled. It was the smile that told Harry the truth of the night. He had grown up against the only standard that mattered, the impossible standard his father set, perfect, untouchable, and he had spent 4 years closing the gap until he could trade blows with the Prince of all Saiyans at 400 gravities and not be ashamed. He had come to this more believing, in the private place where warriors keep the things they do not say, that there was nothing in either of his worlds that could truly stand against him anymore. And here was a thing of stolen magic and torn earth catching his strongest blow on one pale hand and smiling about it. And Harry understood, in that first cold instant, that the easy part of his life had just ended, and that everything his father had ever made him endure had been preparation for exactly this, the moment the standard stopped being a teacher's cruelty and became the only thing keeping him alive. "You see," Voldemort hissed, and his other hand came around and struck Harry across the body and flung him through a stone crypt, through the wall and out the other side. "You see how it is now." Harry came out of the rubble already moving, because his father had spent 14 years teaching him that the floor was the teacher and you did not stay on it. He came back across the graveyard in a streak of light, and the two of them met in the air over the cauldron and traded blows faster than the Death Eaters below could track, magic against fused Kai green corona against white gold, each impact a thunderclap that lit the whole moor. And it was even. That was the thing Harry's body kept telling him, the cold arithmetic under the fury. It was even, and even was not good enough, because this thing did not tire the way a living warrior tired. It drank from the torn-open earth and replenished itself, and a fight that was even against an enemy that did not run down was a fight that ended only one way. Then Vegeta entered, and the arithmetic changed. The Prince of all Saiyans came down on Voldemort's blind side like a falling star, and the two warriors caught the Dark Lord between them, Harry from the front and Vegeta from the back. And for a span of furious minutes they fought him together the way they had trained to fight together for 14 years, no word passing between them because none was needed, each one covering the other's drops, each one feeding the other openings, a single weapon with two edges. They drove Voldemort down out of the air. They cracked his green corona. Vegeta put a fist through the thing's guard and into its sternum, and Harry followed it with a fused beam at point-blank range that lit the moor white and drove the Dark Lord into the earth hard enough to shake the moor for a mile. Around the edges of the crater, the war Harry had grown up expecting was finally being fought in the open. The Order of the Phoenix had come down out of the storm in a ragged wedge, Dumbledore at its head with his wand throwing white fire, and they had met the regrouping Death Eaters among the broken headstones, spell against spell, light against light. It was a true battle now, dozens of wizards locked in the oldest kind of fight, and it raged at the margins while at the center the only thing that truly mattered hammered on, the two warriors and the monster, because everyone on that moor understood, friend and enemy alike, that the wand fight in the dark was a sideshow, and that the war would be won or lost in the column of light, where a 15-year-old and an alien prince were trying to put down a god. Hermione was out there somewhere in the dark, Harry knew, and Ron, both of them old enough now to have insisted, both of them holding their corner of the line, and the knowledge that the people he loved were on the field steadied him and frightened him in the same breath, which his father had once told him on a mountain was exactly what worry was. For one bright instant it looked as though the two of them might simply end it, there together, the way Vegeta had always promised they would. But Voldemort had not spent 4 years preparing to be beaten by the thing he had prepared against. He had spent it preparing for everything. He rose out of the crater laughing, and the laugh was the worst sound Harry had ever heard, because it had no fear in it at all. "Two of you," Voldemort said, wiping black blood from his white face, the green corona already knitting itself back together from the torn-open ley lines beneath the moor. "The beast and his pet. I confess I did not account for the beast fighting at your side. No matter. I prepared for the possibility that I might need to remind you, boy, of the one lesson you have never learned, the lesson your dead mother tried to teach me and failed." His red eyes moved off Harry and fixed on Vegeta, and something in them sharpened into cruelty. Strength is not the only weapon. The strong have always had a weakness the strong refuse to see. They love, and love, Harry Potter, is a door left open in the side of the strongest fortress ever built. He moved then, faster than he had moved all night, faster than a thing his size had any right to move, and he did not move at Harry. He moved at Vegeta. It happened in the space between two heartbeats. Voldemort closed the distance in a streak of green and drove his whole gathered power, 4 years of stolen magic and torn earth and dead creatures, into a single strike aimed at the prince's heart. And Vegeta, who was fast, who was the prince of all Saiyans, who had survived 100 wars across a dozen worlds, was a half-instant too slow, because he had been turning to cover Harry's blind side and his own was open. The blow took him in the chest. The green light went through his armor and through him and out his back, and the prince of all Saiyans, the hardest teacher alive, who had carried a baby out of a ruin and built it into a warrior because he could not bear to watch its fire go cold, folded around the strike and dropped out of the air and hit the broken earth of the graveyard and did not get up. Vegeta. The word tore out of Harry in a voice he did not recognize, and the whole moor went silent around it. He dropped out of the sky and was on his knees beside his father before the echo died, his hands on the ruined armor, on the terrible wound, the green wrongness of the magic eating at the edges of it, and Vegeta's eyes were open, and they found Harry's face, and the prince's scarred hand came up and gripped the front of Harry's gi with the last of his strength. "On your feet," Vegeta said. Blood came with the words. Don't you dare kneel over me while that thing is still breathing. I didn't spend 14 years building you so you could kneel." His grip tightened, fierce, failing. "It thinks it found your weakness. It thinks love is the door in the wall. Show it. Show it what comes through that door when you open it all the way. Show it what your mother put in you. Get up, brat. Get up and turn it all the way up and end this." His hand slipped. His eyes held Harry's, black and certain and proud, prouder than Harry had ever seen them. "That's an order from your—" He did not finish it. The word he had refused to say for 14 years stayed unsaid, but it was there, it had always been there, and they both knew it, and that was worse and better than hearing it. And something in Harry, some last wall that had stood since before he could speak, the wall between the fire he built and the fire that built itself, the wall between the warrior his father made and the love his mother died for, came down all at once and forever. The grief did not come out as grief. It came out as light. Harry rose from his father's side slowly, and the air around him began to scream. The second fire came up out of him, the way it had come up to save a falling brother and break a falling teapot and turn a killing curse. But it did not stop where it had always stopped before. It kept rising. It poured up out of the bottomless place it lived, the place that had no floor, his mother's last choice made into a power, and it met the Kai his father had spent 14 years teaching him to build, the disciplined fire of the body, and the two of them did not simply marry the way they had 1,000 times. They fused. They became, at last, the single thing Vegeta had promised on a mountain that they would one day become, the thing the universe had no word for because there had never been a Harry before to make it. The light tore up off Harry's skin in a column that punched through the clouds and lit the underside of the storm for 50 miles. His black hair lifted and burned at its edges with white-blue fire, neither gold nor any color the old Saiyan legends had ever described, because this was not the Super Saiyan. This was the thing past every limit anyone had ever named. The second fire turned all the way up. The ground cracked away from him in a widening ring. The Death Eaters who had crept back to the edges of the moor were flung from their feet and ran, simply ran, into the dark, because some instinct older than loyalty told them that they were standing too close to something that should not exist. And in the heart of the light stood Harry Potter, 15 years old, wizard and warrior, his mother's love and his father's pride fused into one terrible radiance, and he turned his eyes on Lord Voldemort, and they were green, and they were his mother's, and they were the last thing a great many monsters would ever see. Across the moor, the wand fight stopped. Death Eater and Order member alike lowered their wands and turned, because the light pouring off Harry had washed the whole battlefield white, and the storm itself had begun to spiral around the column of it, the clouds wheeling like water around a drain, lightning crawling up the underside of the sky to meet the fire climbing from the earth. The captured creatures in their cages, the ones not yet emptied, lifted their heads and keened, not in terror but in something nearer to worship, because a unicorn knows a pure thing when it feels one, and there had never in the history of the world been anything as purely itself as the thing Harry had just become. Dumbledore lowered his own wand and simply stared, and his lips moved, and the word they shaped was not a spell but a name, the name of a dead red-haired woman who had once been his student, because the old wizard had understood at last, watching her son burn against the dark, exactly what she had bought with her life and exactly what it had grown into. "You wanted to know how the child who would not die finally learns to die," Harry said, and his voice came layered now, the layered voice of the transformed, ringing across the silent moor. "You've got it backward. You're the one who's about to get a lesson." The white-blue fire roared higher. "You said love was the door in the wall. You were right, this is what comes through it. This is what my mother put in me the night she stood in front of my crib and would not move. You spent 4 years making yourself strong enough to fight my father's gift." He took one step forward and the moor cracked under it. "You never once thought to prepare for my mother's." Voldemort, for the first time since he had risen out of the cauldron, took a step back. What followed was not a fight. A fight has two sides. Harry crossed the distance in less than an eye blink and struck the Dark Lord once, and the blow folded Voldemort's green corona like paper and drove him the length of the graveyard. He was there when the Dark Lord landed, already, and struck him again, and again, faster than the eye could hold, a storm of fused light, and every blow that Voldemort's stolen power had caught and answered an hour ago now passed through that power as though it were not there, because the thing Harry had become was not on the same scale as the thing Voldemort had built. The Dark Lord drank from the torn-open earth to heal himself, and Harry burned the wounds faster than the earth could close them. Voldemort threw the killing curse, the green bolt that could not be blocked, that had no counter in all the long history of magic, and Harry caught it on his open palm, as he had caught a falling ladder at 2 years old, and closed his fist, and crushed it, and the oldest unstoppable death in the wizarding world guttered out between his fingers like a snuffed match. There was no name yet for what Harry did to Lord Voldemort on that moor, and the wizards who survived to tell of it would spend years failing to find one. They would say he moved like weather. They would say the light that came off him had been a second sun, brief and terrible, that scorched the storm clouds from the sky and left the moor lit stark as midday. They would say that the most feared dark wizard who had ever lived, the thing that had murdered and tortured its way through 2 generations and made the whole of Britain afraid to speak its name, had been swatted across a graveyard like an insect, picked up out of its own crater again and again and put back down harder, its stolen power burned out of it faster than the bleeding earth could pour it back in. It was not justice, and it was not mercy, and it was not even, in the end, quite vengeance. It was simply a son, doing what his mother had done, standing between a monster and the people he loved with everything he had turned all the way up. For one moment, one bright impossible moment, it seemed it would end there on that moor with the monster finally broken under the fused fire of the child he had tried to murder in his crib. But Voldemort had one weapon left, the weapon of every coward who has ever lived, and it was the only one that could have saved him. He ran. He tore himself free of the earth and the fight in a final convulsion of stolen power, abandoning his body's wholeness, abandoning his fallen followers, abandoning everything but the spiteful animal will to survive that had carried him out of one ruin already, and he fled straight up and away into the storm faster than even Harry, even transformed, could follow in that first stunned instant, because Harry's first instinct, his deepest instinct, the one his father had built into the foundation of him before all the others, had pulled him not after the fleeing enemy, but back, down, to his knees, beside the prince who lay broken on the cracked earth of the graveyard. The light went out of Harry as he fell beside his father. The transformation could wait. Everything could wait. He gathered the ruined armor and the failing body up against his chest the way that body had once gathered him up out of a different ruin, and he pressed his forehead to the cold scarred one, and he reached down into the bottomless place where his mother lived and poured everything he had, all of it, the second fire that mended broken teapots and caught falling brothers, into the terrible wound in his father's chest. "Don't," Harry said, into the cold skin, and his layered voice had cracked back down to the voice of a frightened child. "Don't you dare. You don't get to give me an order and then leave before I finish it. On your feet. On your feet, you stubborn, impossible, on your feet, please." Far above, lost in the storm, the thing that had been Lord Voldemort fled across the night, broken again, beaten again, alive again, carrying with it the one piece of knowledge that made the whole ruined night a victory. That the child could be hurt, that the door in the wall was real, that the way to break the thing he could not beat was not to fight it but to take from it, one beloved piece at a time, everything it had ever opened that door for. And on the cracked earth of the graveyard, a 15-year-old held his dying father and poured his mother's love into a wound that magic had made, and did not know yet whether it would be enough. It was not enough on its own. The wound the relic had made was a wound that fought healing, and the second fire could only hold the prince at the edge of death, not pull him back from it, and for a long terrible while on the cracked earth of the graveyard Harry knelt and poured everything he had into a body that would not mend, while the Order's survivors gathered in a silent ring around them, and not one of them dared to speak. Goku saved him. He arrived as he always arrived, without warning, 2 fingers at his forehead, gone from a mountain across the world and standing on the moor in the space of a breath, because he had felt the battle from his own kitchen and come the instant it ended, and in his hand was a single shriveled green bean. "Corrin's last senzu," he said, dropping to his knees across from Harry, his cheerful face gone grave. "I came as fast as I could. Get it into him, quick, before there's nothing left to save." And Harry, with hands that finally, after everything, were not steady, pressed the bean past his father's bloodless lips and made him swallow, and the moor held its breath. The senzu did what 14 years of medicine could not have. The terrible wound closed. The color came back into the scarred face by degrees, and the chest under the ruined armor rose, once deep, and Vegeta's black eyes opened on the storm and then on the face of the child bent over him, and the Prince of all Saiyans, who had just been to the very threshold and back, took stock of the situation with a single sweeping glance and said, in a voice like gravel, "You let it run." "I let it run," Harry agreed, and his cracked, layered voice was almost a laugh and almost not. "I had a choice between chasing the thing that did this and staying with the person it did it to. I chose you. I'd choose you again." Something moved across Vegeta's ruined face that he did not, this time, trouble to kill, and he reached up and gripped the front of Harry's gi, not to give an order now, only to hold on. "Good," he said roughly. "That was the right choice, and it was the wrong choice, and you will spend the rest of your life learning that the two are the same thing more often than anyone admits. Help me up. I refuse to be carried off a battlefield in front of wizards." They got him up. He stood swaying on the cracked earth, the Prince of all Saiyans alive against every odds, and the Order of the Phoenix looked at the two of them, the alien and the child, and understood at last and completely what they had been told and had not quite believed. Ron and Hermione reached Harry then, out of the smoke and the thinning rain, soot-streaked and battered and alive, and Hermione threw her arms around him without a word and held on, and Ron gripped his shoulder hard enough to bruise. And for a moment Harry stood in the wreck of the worst night of his life with his father breathing beside him and his two oldest friends pressed against him and let himself, for exactly that moment, simply be held. He had been raised by a being who taught that you guarded the people weaker than you, and somewhere across 14 years that lesson had quietly grown into its truer shape, which was that you let the people who loved you guard you back, sometimes, when the night had taken everything you had. Hermione was crying and pretending not to. Ron kept saying, "You mad, brilliant lunatic, you mad, brilliant lunatic," over and over, which was the closest he could come to the thing he meant. Harry held onto both of them, and over Hermione's shoulder he met his father's eyes, and Vegeta, battered and grim and freshly hauled back from death, gave the smallest nod, the one that across a lifetime of small nods had always meant the same thing. "Good. This is what it was all for. Don't ever apologize for it." Dumbledore came to them through the smoke, old and bent and grim, and he did not waste their time with comfort. "He is whole now," the headmaster said, looking up into the storm where the Dark Lord had vanished. "Embodied and stronger than he has ever been, and he has fled to gather himself and lick his wounds, which means we have a little time and not much. He learned a great deal tonight, Harry. He learned that you can become something he cannot match in open battle, and he learned the price of that something, which is that you love and that the ones you love can be reached." Dumbledore's blue eyes were heavy with a decade of dread come due. "He will not fight you fairly again. He will come for Bulma, for Trunks, for Ronald and Miss Granger, for everyone whose loss would put out the fire in you. That is the war we are in now, not a war of strength. A war for the people who make you strong." Harry looked at the old man, and then at his father standing battered and breathing beside him, and then up into the storm where the thing that had murdered his parents had fled to plan the murder of everyone else he loved, and the cold clear calm his father had spent 14 years teaching him to find settled over him completely. "Then we don't wait for it to choose the ground," Harry said. "We don't sit in a castle and let it pick us off. We find it and we end it, all of us together, before it can take a single one of them." He looked at Vegeta. "No more rounds, no more running. The next time we meet that thing, one of us doesn't leave." "Now," said Vegeta, with the ghost of his old hard pride, putting his hand on the black head one more time, "you sound like my son." He had still not said the word as a name, but he had said it at last out loud on a battlefield in front of an army, and Harry heard it land, and carried it up off the moor and home through the breaking dawn like the most valuable thing two worlds had ever paid for, which is exactly what it was. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The Prince's Legacy. They had 3 weeks to wait for the end of the world, and they spent them the only way Harry's family knew how, which was getting ready. Bulma did not sleep. She turned the whole compound into a fortress, a shield dome of her own design woven through with the Kai Vegeta, and Harry poured into her emitters, sensors strung across the valley, escape capsules pressed into Trunks's reluctant hands against an outcome no one would say aloud. Dumbledore came twice and the Order with him, learning the ground, because all of them understood now that the last battle of this war would not be fought in a castle but here, on a nameless mountain, in the one place the Dark Lord had correctly judged would cost Harry the most. Goku stayed close. Ron and Hermione refused, flatly and finally, to be sent anywhere safe, and Harry, who had been raised to honor the choice to stand and fight, stopped trying to make them. They trained, they waited, they sharpened everything that could be sharpened and held close everything that could be lost. The night before the Dark Lord came, Harry climbed up onto the roof of the main residence, where he had gone his whole life when the chamber was too small for his thoughts, and he was not surprised to find his father already there, sitting with his forearms on his knees, looking at the lights of West City smeared orange along the horizon. You couldn't sleep either, Harry said, lying back on the warm tiles beside him as he had at 8 years old. I don't sleep before a fight that matters, never have. Vegeta did not look away from the city. The body wants the rest. The body is wrong. The night before is for sharpening the thing the day will need, and the thing tomorrow needs is not a rested body. It's a settled mind. He was quiet a moment. Are you afraid? Harry considered it honestly, the way the two of them had always traded only in honest things. Not of dying. You trained that out of me before I could talk. I'm afraid of losing one of them. He looked up at the stars, the same indifferent stars he had counted his whole life. Trunks, Mum, Ron, Hermione. You, that's the only fear left in me. It's the one you couldn't drill out because it isn't weakness, it's the thing the strength is for. No, Vegeta agreed low. I couldn't drill it out. I tried when you were small. I'm glad now that I failed. He turned his head, and in the dark his face was unguarded in the way it only ever was up here. Whatever happens tomorrow, brat, you remember one thing past all the others. You were not a weapon I built. I told the wizards that once, and it was a lie I needed them to believe. You were a son I raised, and the strength was only ever the wrapping on the thing. Tomorrow you fight for the wrapping if you must, but you win for what's inside it. Do you understand? I understand, Harry said, and they lay and sat together on the roof a while longer under the wheeling stars, the last prince of a dead world and the lost son of another, while down below the people they loved slept behind a wall built out of fear and engineering, and the dark gathered, and the dawn came on. Voldemort came for the mountain at dawn, which was Harry's hour, and that was the first mistake the Dark Lord made. He came the way Dumbledore had promised he would, not to a castle full of old men, but to the one place in all the world that would cost Harry the most to lose. The compound on the nameless mountain north of West City, the white dome and the cracked tile and the scorched slopes, the only home Harry had ever had. He came with what was left of his army at his back, and the black relic blazing at his throat, and 4 years of stolen power knit into a body that had spent the weeks since the moor doing nothing but growing stronger. And he tore down out of the morning sky over the valley and unmade the outer wall of the compound with a single sweep of green fire, and he called Harry's true name across the ringing air. Harry Potter, come out and watch your home burn the way your first one burned. Come and learn the lesson at last. But the home did not burn because the home had been waiting for him. Bulma had spent the weeks building, because that was what Bulma did with fear. She turned it into engineering, and the compound that Voldemort struck was not the soft target he had imagined. The green fire that should have leveled it broke against a shield dome of her design, Kyrie-enforced, humming, and held. And out of the unburned house, into the gray dawn, came the people the Dark Lord had come to take from Harry one piece at a time, and they did not run, and they were not afraid, and that, more than any wall, was the thing Voldemort had failed to plan for. Harry walked out first, calm, unhurried, the holly wand in one hand and the second fire banked behind his ribs, and his green eyes very steady on the monster in the sky. Behind him came Vegeta, healed and whole and terrible, the prince of all Saiyans in fresh battle armor with murder in the set of his shoulders. Behind them came Trunks, 11 now and a warrior in his own right, white-knuckled and ferocious, refusing to be left inside. Behind them came Goku, who had felt the Dark Lord's approach and crossed the world to stand with them, cheerful and grave at once. And ranged across the broken wall, wands up, came the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore at their head, and Ron and Hermione among them, because Harry's family had stopped being a thing that could be picked apart in the dark and become a thing that stood together in the light. You wanted to make me watch the people I love die, Harry said, and his voice carried flat and clear across the valley the way his father had taught him to make it carry, 11 years ago on this same mountain. So I brought them all. Every one of them, here, where you can see them. Because you've spent your whole long life believing that love is a weakness, a door in the wall, a thing that can be used against the strong. He raised the wand, and the second fire came up to meet it, and the dawn lit gold and storm blue around him. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes teaching you, very thoroughly, exactly how wrong you've always been. The final battle for the mountain began, and it was nothing like the moor. On the moor Harry had been surprised. He had come expecting a ghost and found a god, and the shock of it had cost him precious time before he understood the shape of the fight. He was not surprised now. He had spent the weeks since training for this exact enemy, against the memory of every blow Voldemort had thrown, and when the Dark Lord came down out of the sky in a column of green fire, Harry met him in the air over his own valley, and the two of them collided with a crack that rolled off the mountains and was heard faintly in West City, where people would look up at the dawn and wonder what the sound had been. Harry fought the way 14 years of dawns had taught him, and the difference showed. He did not waste a motion. He read the Dark Lord's rhythm as he had once read a prince's guard, finding the half-beat patterns in Voldemore's stolen power and building traps for them mid-fight. And where the relic poured limitless strength into the Dark Lord's blows, Harry answered with precision, turning that strength aside instead of meeting it, letting the monster spend itself against the empty air while he picked his openings. It was the lesson under all the gravity and all the blood, the lesson of 1,000 drone sessions in a white dome. The strong man who only knows he is strong dies to the strong man who also knows how to fight. Voldemort had made himself powerful. Harry had been made into a warrior. For long stretches of that morning, over the mountain that had forged him, the difference was the only thing keeping the sky from falling. It was even again, at first, the green corona against the white gold, and even was still not enough, because the relic at Voldemort's throat poured power into him without limit. But Harry was not alone, and that was the difference the Dark Lord had never been able to make himself understand. Vegeta hit Voldemort from the left and Goku from the right, two Saiyans at the peak of their power, and the three warriors caught the Dark Lord between them and hammered him across the sky. And for a span of furious minutes the morning over the mountain was nothing but light, Kai and magic and stolen fire, blows that cratered the slopes and boiled the clouds. Below them the Order held the broken wall against the Death Eaters, Dumbledore's white fire and Hermione's quick cleverness and Ron's steady courage and Trunks, 11 years old and incandescent with the need to prove himself, fighting beside them all, guarding the home Harry had told him long ago was his to guard. Goku fought as he had fought his whole life, with a terrible joy in it, laughing as he turned the Dark Lord's strikes, and more than once that laugh was the thing that kept the morning from tipping into despair, because there is a kind of courage that frightens an enemy and a kind that heartens a friend, and Goku had always been the second kind. He and Vegeta moved around the Dark Lord in the old rhythm of two rivals who had spent decades learning each other, the prince's cold precision and the low-class warrior's wild instinct covering each other's gaps without a word. And Harry, fighting between them, understood for the first time, truly understood, what his father had given up to stand on this mountain and raise a stranger's child. Vegeta could have spent those 14 years chasing Kakarot across the stars, hunting the transformation that had been stolen from his bloodline, nursing the one wound his pride could never close. Instead, he had spent them teaching an orphan to get up. And here at the end of everything, the two old rivals fought side by side for that orphan's sake, and whatever had been broken between them across the long years was, in the white light of that morning, simply gone. It was, for a while, almost glorious, almost the clean fight Vegeta had always promised, the family standing together against the dark and giving better than they got. And then Voldemort stopped trying to win the fight and went back to the only strategy that had ever beaten Harry, the one he had prepared on the moor and perfected in the weeks since. He stopped fighting the strong. He reached with all the speed of his stolen power, past the warriors who could hurt him, down toward the wall where the ones who could be hurt were holding the line. He reached for Trunks. It happened in the space of a breath, the way the worst things always do. Voldemort tore free of the three Saiyans in a convulsion of green fire and dove, faster than even Goku could follow, straight down toward the broken wall, where Bulma's son stood with his small, ferocious wand raised against a tide of Death Eaters. And the Dark Lord's pale hand closed with all 4 years of murder behind it on a single killing strike aimed at the child's heart, because he had understood, watching the moor, that the way to break Harry Potter was to take a brother the way something had once almost taken him. Vegeta was closer than Harry, and Vegeta was faster, and Vegeta did not hesitate for the length of a thought. The Prince of all Saiyans crossed the distance in less than an eye blink and put himself between his son and the strike, and the green fire that had been meant for Trunks's heart took Vegeta instead, full in the chest, the second terrible wound in as many battles, and the prince folded around it and drove the Dark Lord's arm wide with the last of his strength, spoiling the blow, throwing Voldemort off his line, buying with his own body the half-second that Trunks needed to scramble back into the shelter of the Order's wands. "Dad!" Trunks screamed. Vegeta. Harry was already falling out of the sky toward him. Below, Trunks had gone to his knees in the rubble where his father's body had thrown him to safety, and the 11-year-old looked up at the prince hanging broken in the sky and made a sound that no child should ever have to make, the sound Harry himself might have made in a ruined nursery 16 years before if he had been old enough to understand what was being taken from him. Hermione had her arms around the smaller boy in an instant, dragging him back from the edge of the broken wall, and Ron stood over both of them with his wand up and his face like stone against a thing he could not fight, and the whole Order's line wavered, because they had all just watched the unbreakable prince broken a second time, and if Vegeta could fall, anyone could. And Vegeta, broken for the second time, bleeding out the Dark Lord's stolen fire, caught himself in the air by raw will alone and did not fall, and turned his head and found Harry's face, and what was on the prince's own ruined features was not pain and was not fear. It was the fierce, unmistakable thing he had spent 17 years refusing to name and had finally named on a moor, and it blazed out of him now without any armor over it at all. "I'm all right," Vegeta lied, the blood coming with it, holding himself in the sky on nothing but refusal. "I'm all right, Harry. Stay in the fight. Do not come down here. That thing wants you to come down here and grieve, the way it has always wanted, and I did not raise you to give your enemy what it wants." His voice was failing and his eyes were not. "Listen to me. This is the lesson. This is the whole lesson, the one under every other lesson I ever taught you, and I needed you to see it and not just hear it, so look at me, brat, and learn it now. I stepped in front of that strike for Trunks without thinking, the way your mother stepped in front of you, not because I am strong, because I love him, the thing that creature calls a weakness." He coughed red and grinned through it, ferocious, proud. "It is the strongest thing in the universe, Harry. It is the only thing I have ever met that is stronger than power. Your mother proved it on you. I am proving it on Trunks. Now you," the grin widened, terrible and certain, "you go and prove it on that monster once and for all. Turn it all the way up. Both fires. Show the universe what comes through the door." Something happened in Harry then that had no precedent because there had never been a Harry before to set one. On the moor, his power had risen out of grief, the second fire pouring up from its bottomless place when he believed his father was dying. But this was not grief. His father was not dying, not yet, was holding himself in the sky by sheer refusal exactly as he had taught his son to do, and what rose in Harry now was not the desperate flood of loss but something cleaner and far more terrible. The whole of him, every part, agreeing at once on what it was for. The fire his father built, the disciplined Kai of 14 years of dawns. The fire his mother gave, the storm that mended teapots and caught falling brothers and broke a killing curse. The pride that had counted 10,000 falls and 10,001 risings and made the last number his. The love that had stood guard over a baby brother and held a troll's club on its bare arms and chosen, on a ruined moor, to kneel beside a fallen father rather than chase a fleeing enemy. All of it, the warrior and the wizard, the prince's hard gift and the mother's soft one, the two bloodlines that had run alongside each other in him his whole life, came together at last and completely, and decided, in a single bright and final act of will, to be one thing. The light that came off Harry Potter, then, did not have a color, because no color had ever been asked to do what it was doing. It was the gold of the Kai and the blue of the storm, and under both of them something white and total, the white of a thing turned all the way up, and it climbed off his skin in a pillar that split the dawn sky from the mountain to the edge of space, and the clouds fled from it, and the Death Eaters dropped their wands and ran, and even Voldemort, even the Dark Lord drunk on 4 years of stolen power, went still in the air, because the oldest animal part of him, the part that had always known when to flee a ruined nursery, was screaming that the thing rising over the mountain was not something he had prepared for, and not something he could survive. The valley could not hold it, and the morning could not hold it. The shield dome Bulma had built sang and then shone, catching the overflow, and beneath it the people Harry loved lifted their faces into a light that did not burn them, because it had never once in its life burned the things it was for. Trunks stopped crying. Dumbledore, who had given his whole long life to the study of power, and had believed, until that morning, that he understood its shapes, lowered his wand and watched a boy he had failed, and a boy he had found become the same boy, and felt the dread he had carried for 16 years finally, completely, go out. And across the broken valley, the surviving Death Eaters looked once at the pillar of white gold fire standing over the mountain, and made the only intelligent decision of their lives, which was to drop their masters, mark in the mud and run, because there are some things a person feels in the animal root of the spine, and one of them is the certainty that you are standing in the presence of something that loves harder than you have ever hated, and that it has finally, after all its patient years, come for you. "You wanted a name for it," Harry said, and his voice rang layered and vast across the whole valley, and he was looking at his father when he said it, not the enemy, because the words were for Vegeta and had always been for Vegeta. "I've got one now. You asked me once what it felt like, and I told you it felt like a tide and a flame at the same time and neither one putting the other out." The white gold fire roared higher, and his green eyes, his mother's eyes, found the Dark Lord at last. "It's both of them, everything you made me and everything she gave me, so that's what I'll call it, not a Saiyan thing and not a wizard thing. Mine." He took one step into the air toward Lord Voldemort, and the sky cracked under it. And the last thing you're ever going to learn in your whole long, greedy life is that there was never a door in the wall. The love was the wall. It always was. You just spent 70 years too afraid to feel it to ever understand what you were throwing yourself against. What followed was not a battle, and it was not an execution, and the survivors never did agree on a word for it. Harry crossed the sky and struck Lord Voldemort, and the relic at the Dark Lord's throat, the black shard that had drunk the power of 100 dead creatures and the torn-open veins of the earth, the vessel that had made a ghost into a god, took the full weight of the fused fire and could not hold it. It cracked. The stolen power screamed out of it all at once. The lives it had hoarded set suddenly free, and Voldemort, who had built his whole resurrection on the relic's bottomless theft, felt the floor go out from under his strength for the first time since the moor, and knew, in the cold animal way he had always known, that he had finally come to the one fight he could not flee and could not win. He tried everything that had ever saved him, and one by one the family took the escapes away. He threw the killing curse, the green bolt that could not be blocked, that had no counter in all the long history of magic, and Harry caught it on his open palm and crushed it as he had crushed its brother in a chamber beneath a castle 4 years before, and let it gutter out between his fingers like a snuffed match. He hurled his stolen power outward in a wave meant to scatter them all, and Goku planted himself in front of the wall and the people behind it, and held the wave on his crossed arms, grinning through it, buying the seconds. He reached down for the torn-open earth to drink it dry and heal himself as he had on the moor, and found the well already closed, because Trunks and Hermione together, the half-Saiyan and the witch, had sealed the bleeding ley lines while the warriors fought. The young Saiyan's Kai and the witch's craft braided into a working neither could have managed alone. Every door the Dark Lord had spent a lifetime keeping open, every coward's exit, every theft and cheat and hidden anchor, the family found and shut, one after another, until Lord Voldemort stood at last in the morning air over a mountain that hated him with nowhere left to flee and nothing left to steal, and no one left to take hostage, which was, in the end, the only condition under which a thing like him could ever truly be beaten. He turned at the very last to run, as he had run from a nursery and a castle and a moor, the coward's instinct that had carried him across half a century of murder, and Vegeta was there. Broken, bleeding, held up by nothing but the refusal he had spent a lifetime teaching, the Prince of all Saiyans put himself in the Dark Lord's path one final time, not to strike, because he had nothing left to strike with, but to block, to close the last door, to be the wall behind the enemy so that his son's fire would have nowhere left to chase. "Now, Harry," Vegeta said, soft and certain, holding the line with his own ruined body as he had held every line of Harry's whole life. "On your feet. Finish it. I've got your back. I've always had your back." Harry brought both fires together into a single point between his hands, the tide and the flame, everything he was and everything he had been given, and he looked one last time at the thing that had murdered his parents and tried to murder his family and spent a lifetime calling love a weakness, and he felt no hatred at all, only the vast clean calm at the center of every fight, and behind the calm, holding it up, the love that was the wall. "This is for my mother," Harry said, "and my father. Both of them," and he opened his hands. The fused light took Lord Voldemort and did not leave enough behind to bury. It poured through the cracked relic and the failing body and the screaming spirit and the dark anchors he had hidden across the world to cheat his death, all of them, all at once, found and burned and unmade, because the second fire went where Harry meant it to go, and Harry meant it to find every last broken piece of the thing and end it forever. For one instant the whole valley was white. And then the light folded back down into a 15-year-old standing in the morning air over his own mountain, and where Lord Voldemort had been there was nothing at all, not ash, not echo, not the faintest cold wrong taste on the wind. The thing that had broken on a baby in a ruin 16 years before was at last and completely gone. Harry did not stop to look at the empty sky. He was already falling, the light gone out of him, the transformation spent, down toward the broken wall where his father had finally, after holding the line one impossible time too many, allowed himself to drop. It took 2 senzu beans and 3 days before Vegeta was on his feet again, and he complained about every hour of the convalescence with such ferocious bad grace that Bulma threatened twice to put him back into the wound herself. The first bean had pulled him back from the edge the way the senzu always did, the terrible wound closing, the stolen fire burned out of him at last. But the relic's magic had left a deeper mark than the body alone, and it took the second bean and 3 days of rest before the prince stopped looking, to Harry's eye, like a man holding himself together by will, which was a thing Harry knew about, having watched it modeled for him his whole life. So he stayed close those 3 days. He brought the food Bulma cooked and made his father eat it. He sat in the room through the long afternoons, and they did not talk much, because the not talking had always said the most. And once, when Vegeta drifted into a true sleep for the first time since the battle, Harry sat and watched the rise and fall of the scarred chest under the blanket the way the prince had once stood in a nursery doorway and watched his, and understood, completely and without grief, that the debt between them had long ago stopped being a debt and become the simplest thing in the universe. Which was a family, taking turns keeping watch. The mountain was quiet in the way places are quiet after a war. The outer wall was rubble, and the slopes were cratered, and the white dome of the gravity chamber had a new scorch up one side that no one was in any hurry to repair, because some marks you keep. The order had gone home. Dumbledore had come on the second day, and stood a long while over the place where Voldemort had ended, and had said to Harry only that the wizarding world owed him a debt it could never name, much less pay, and that he hoped Harry would forgive an old man for the years he had spent fearing the wrong things. Harry had told him there was nothing to forgive, and had meant it, because he had been raised by someone who knew the difference between the people who failed you and the people who never stopped trying, and Dumbledore had only ever been the second kind. The wizarding world, when the news reached it, did not know what to do with itself. Lord Voldemort was gone, truly and finally gone, ended not in some prophesied hour by some chosen savior wielding ancient magic, but on a foreign mountain by a young man who fought like nothing their long history had a word for, with an alien at his back and a half-Saiyan child and a blue-haired inventor and his two best friends. There were those who wanted to make Harry a hero, to hang his portrait in the ministry and put his face on the front of the prophet and turn the whole impossible story into a tidy myth they could understand. Harry declined all of it, politely and absolutely, as he had declined it on his kitchen table at 11 years old. He was not a savior, and he was not a symbol, and he was not a weapon anyone got to point. He was a wizard who had also been raised a warrior, and he intended to finish his education and visit his family and live, which was the one thing the lost boy who lived had never been allowed to do, and the one thing he meant to do most. Ron and Hermione stayed at the compound through the recovery, because they were his family too now, woven into it the way Trunks was, the way Goku and Bulma were. Hermione spent the 3 days in Bulma's lab, the two finest minds either world had produced, finding in each other a delight that frankly alarmed everyone else, and Ron taught Trunks wizard's chess and lost with great dignity, over and over, to an 11-year-old who attacked a chessboard as he attacked everything, head-on and without mercy. The compound, which had been a fortress braced for the end of the world, became, by slow degrees, simply a house full of people who had survived together, which is the loudest and warmest thing a house can be. Trunks took the longest to come back to himself, because Trunks had felt the green fire pass close enough to part his hair, and at 11 that does not leave a person quickly. Harry found him on the second night sitting on the back step in the dark, knees pulled up, exactly as he had sat there 5 years before after saying a cruel thing in a yard, and Harry sat down beside him, shoulder to shoulder, and looked up at the stars and waited. He stepped in front of it, Trunks said at last in a flattened voice. Dad, he stepped in front of the thing that was going to kill me, and he scrubbed his face hard with both fists. I keep seeing it, I can't stop seeing it. I know. Harry bumped his shoulder against the smaller one. He did the same thing your mother does, and the same thing my mother did, and the same thing I'd do for you without thinking about it for half a second. That's what this family is, Trunks. We step in front of the fire for each other. It's the whole thing, it's the only thing. He looked at his brother. You held your post on that wall while it happened. 11 years old against an army, and you didn't run, and you didn't fall, and you guarded the people behind you exactly like I asked you to on a railway platform 4 years ago. Do you understand what that makes you? Trunks shook his head, not trusting his voice. A warrior, Harry said. The real kind, the kind your dad made and mine, not because you're strong though you are, because when it counted, you stood in front of the people who needed you. He gripped the small shoulder hard, as he had been gripped his whole life. On your feet, come inside. You did your post proud, and tomorrow you can do my drills wrong on purpose again, and I'll pretend not to notice because that's what brothers are for. And Trunks laughed, wet and sudden, the easy bottomless laugh of a child whose world has been put back together, and the two of them went in out of the dark together, brothers who shared no blood and would have stepped in front of any fire in the universe for each other, which is the only kind of brother that was ever worth having. And on the slope behind it, the cracked tile and the scorched dome and the rebuilt wall stood in the early light, the marks of a war kept on purpose, because some marks you keep, and a boy who had once scratched a private ledger of his falls and his risings under that tile added on the second night one final mark to the rising side, the largest fall and the largest rising of his whole life, and made sure, as he had been taught, that the last number was his. On the third day, Harry found his father where he knew he would, out by the gravity chamber in the early light, easing himself through the first slow forms of a body, remembering how to be a body. Harry came and stood beside him, as he had stood beside this man every dawn of his life, and for a while neither of them said anything, because the not saying had always been their truest language. "You let it run on the moor," Vegeta said at last, picking up a thread 4 years' worth of mornings old. "And then you finished it here with me at your back where it belonged. That was the right order. The kill was yours, the door was mine to hold." He lowered his arms and looked at the valley, and the morning, and the scorched dome, and the home that had not burned. "You did well, Harry. You did better than well. You did the thing I have wanted my whole life to see done, and you did it your own way, with your mother's fire and my discipline both. And there was a moment up there." His jaw worked, the thing he did not have. "There was a moment when I looked at what you'd become, and I understood that I had spent 14 years building the strongest thing the universe has ever seen, and that the strongest thing in it was strong because it loved, and I was wrong all those years ago. When I told you I would give you the part of me that gets back up and none of the rest, I gave you that part, but you took the rest yourself, the part I didn't know how to give, and you made it into the thing that won." He was quiet a moment. "Your mother would be proud of you, so would your father, the one downstairs in the ruin and the one standing next to you now." Harry did not trust his voice for a moment. Then he said carefully, because they had an understanding about this and he did not want to break it by making it soft, "Say it, the whole thing, just once. You said half of it on the moor. I want the whole thing on your feet in the daylight where you can't pretend later that I imagined it." Vegeta turned and looked at the child he had carried out of a ruin 16 years before, the lost infant who had grabbed his glove in a broken nursery and refused to cry, the warrior he had built and the son he had never planned to have and could no longer imagine living without, and the prince of all Saiyans, who had ended worlds and crossed the stars and held a dying line with his own body so his boy's fire would have somewhere to land, said the whole thing, out loud in the daylight. "You're my son," Vegeta said. "I love you. I have loved you since you grabbed my glove in that ruin and would not cry, and I will love you when both of us are dust, and there has never been one single day of it that I regretted, not the falls, not the blood, not the worry, not any of it. You were the best thing I ever did, not the strongest, the best." His scarred hand came up and settled on the top of the black head, once as it had since the child could stand, and stayed there. "Now. That's the last time I say it where anyone might overhear, so don't get used to it. On your feet, brat. The wall isn't going to rebuild itself, and your brother, S been doing your drills wrong on purpose to get your attention, and your mother, S made enough breakfast to founder an army, and the day's wasting." The corner of his mouth moved, the thing that was not quite a smile and meant more than one. "And we do not waste." Harry leaned just slightly into the rough scarred hand, as he had since before he could speak, and the sun came up over the mountain that had made him, gold and ordinary and miraculous, over the home that had not burned and the family that had not broken and the two of them standing together in the new light, the last prince of a dead world and the lost son of another, bound by nothing but choice, which is the only binding that ever held. And then they went in to breakfast, because they had earned it, and because some mornings, after all the falls, the only thing left to do is get up one more time than you fell, and go and sit down at the table with the people you would break worlds for, and eat. Chapter 7 end.